Welcome back, dear listeners, to the next episode of GrimLore, the lore podcast for all your grimdark fantasy and sci-fi settings. I am your dwarven host, Gerald, and joining me is our elven bard, Rayway, and the Cornate Croxagore, Toasty, and the Imperial Dwarf, Astronautical. So if you are new to this tavern, welcome. Please join a seat. There's plenty of room here for all who are interested in listening to whatever grimdark lore we are talking about.
Yes, welcome to everybody. Welcome everybody. This is our
Here,
tavern.
here.
Yes, here. Of course, backed by popular demand, Astro, and backed by unpopular demand, Toasty.
Yes.
What are you doing?
So you came to us.
Season 1. Keep coming back.
Can't stay away.
Oh my god, we should do seasons.
I put so many expulsion runes all over the doors, yet Toasty keeps coming back.
That's the problem with being part lizard and part demon, you know?
He takes it more as a challenge. It's more of an invitation than anything.
This
He
is
sees
my
the
home.
runes. He sees the runes, sees Gerald's name attached to it, and he goes, "Fuck yes."
Yes, I have been summoned.
So, Astro, you kind of came to us in a hurry. You looked like you wanted to show us something or tell us something.
Yeah, there's a little project that's been going on under the tavern that I think you guys might be interested in.
I don't know, man. Last time we went downstairs, we found Toasty in the fighting pits, and then Exo and Slappy broke a warp portal. I don't know, man. Going downstairs just has not ended well for us.
It's in the other corner. Trust me, it's nothing like that. As a matter of fact, every problem you can conceive of will not be a problem anymore if you just take a little walk into this place I've made.
Well, man,
Sounds beyond threatening. Let's fucking go.
Beyond threat. The only problem are the people inside it. That's the only threats you got to worry about.
Okay. All right.
I'm always
Well,
down for a challenge.
Yeah, it's fine.
I guess I'll close up the bar here, and we'll head downstairs.
Yeah, no expense was spared.
It never is.
Well, if you'll just take a walk through this circular doorway.
What?
Dwarves don't build circular doorways. What is this?
It's okay. Don't worry about that. It's a human design.
What?
Just keep
What?
walking for a bit. Don't worry about it. Can we
Looks
get
like something
everybody
I've
past
seen.
the door? That would be a good start.
Okay. Don't remember letting human builders down here before, but
Just
Looks like something
shut
those
the door
dwarves
behind
and
me there.
the Elder Scrolls made.
Let's just shut the door. We don't need anybody else coming in.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
Okay.
This is a team before.
You fellows know that my last name is Vault-Tech.
Oh, fuck.
You have
What?
last
What-
name?
what-
Did nobody
Why do I-
check my membership records? Did nobody look at the names?
I just remember you I just remember saving your butt from Flub, and you gave me a huge sack of gold, and I said yes, and did not ask any further questions.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the important thing to remember is that none of those people can harm us once we're inside here. That's the whole point of this place. I've been working on it since I got here.
So that explains all the missing tools and why Slappy kept on leaving the tavern in a fit.
Some of those tools were mine. I just want to make that clear.
Oh, so the Chaos Dwarf was being a thief and stealing from the Dwarf. Okay.
Yeah, it took a lot of deals. It took a lot of junk bonds. It took a lot of finagling to get this place built. But we're going to need it, because I don't know if you guys know this, but a cataclysmic apocalypse is inevitable. It's coming soon.
Oh, fuck. No, not the end times.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
End times
no.
it is. With all of
Oh,
the horrible writing you can imagine.
No!
Does the
I'm
armor at
supposed to be on
least
the other side
survive
of this
stabs
for
in the
this.
back?
The armor may be stab proof. I'm pretty sure it's not nuke proof.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you win some, you lose some, I guess?
Oh, yeah. So now we just have to hang out and just wait it out.
That's it.
Wait.
We're gonna go outside, not when it's all irradiated with warp dust everywhere.
Oh,
Oh no. I smell a
flashbacks.
rat.
Oh yeah,
Flashbacks.
everything has been designed for your comfort and safety. Don't worry about that.
No, this entire place is built to accommodate a fucking dwarf.
I
I
feel
can
pretty
actually-
squished down here.
It's
Is
okay.
that a
You'll get used to it after the first decade or so.
Is that a luxury rock bath?
It sure is.
Hell yes.
Oh yeah.
This was not built to code, I will tell you this now.
It was built to A code.
Just not the donut code.
That's definitely not the donut code.
I'll have you know the donut code has led to many fine designs being built over the millennia.
Yeah, just not this one.
Your donut code has no power here.
The door was shaped like a donut.
A much stronger code was involved in this place. It's the United States Federal Code. That's what it is.
Oh, so you have infinite money.
Infinite money. You
Ah.
can't even imagine.
The superpower of infinite money. Fantastic.
Oh yeah. It'll even survive the destruction of the old world.
Okay. Well, that's sounds like a good thing to have here in the tavern.
Oh yeah.
Wait,
So-
we make money?
Yeah.
Some of us do.
We kind of have to keep this thing going. That's why you put me in charge of the money, so I don't spend it all on warp dust.
What the hell is money?
Defense funding that goes through this place.
It's like the blood and skulls of corn. The more you have, the better you look.
Basically.
I can get behind
So-
this.
So, dear listeners, to stop beating around the bush, we are talking about a brand new setting tonight. We are talking about Fallout, courtesy of Astronautical.
Oh yeah. You guys, I know Toasty has played some Fallout, but what about you guys, Gerald and Ray? You guys play any Fallout games?
I have not.
I-
I know it exists, and I know it's like 1950s Red Scare type of propaganda set in the future. And then
Good way.
there's
Putting it.
sort of Space Marines, but not really Space Marines, called the Brotherhood of Steel.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's all I know.
Okay. Well, what about you, Ray? Any experience?
Played Fallout 4 multiple times, both with and without mods. But
Without mods,
otherwise,
okay.
I haven't played any of the other Fallout games.
Okay. Well, we're gonna take a big timeline jump back from that, so we can sort of set the groundwork here, because the story, for all intents and purposes, really starts in 2051. Even though there's historical events that are stated to have happened that coincide with our history, and some of them are a little bit different, but as Gerald mentioned, yeah, there's a 1950s aesthetic and a sort of culture. It has like a retro rebirth in America, presumably in other countries as well, but the series mostly focuses on what's going on in the US. So there's robot servants that are common in middle class homes for domestic chores and stuff like that. There's a lot of nuclear power. It has this real 50s atomic futurism kind of feel to it. But the problem begins when deposits of petroleum and uranium start drying up across the globe. Despite nuclear power being such a major source of energy, petroleum is still the major one for cars and most things, and still is in use for plastics and all kind of commercial products. It starts becoming a problem producing it domestically in the U.S. There's like a documentary that sweeps the nation, which shows barren oil fields in Texas because it's all dried up. There's no more oil to pump. And it creates a lot of nationalist sentiment and a lot of protectionist economics as the situation gets worse. But it doesn't stay an American problem very quick. They immediately start to cripple Mexico with economic sanctions just to destabilize the country. Then they use the instability and a bunch of other silly excuses like pollution as an excuse to invade Mexico for national security reasons.
Oh my gosh.
Just to make sure they can secure whatever fuel reserves are in Mexico and bring them back to the U.S. But it doesn't really do much to help the problem because the scarcity is still a big issue. But what it does do is encourage everybody else to start making crazy moves. So the next year,
The Americans started it.
yeah, they kind of just set off a whole chain of stuff going on. The next year in 2052, um, the lore doesn't specify any one country. It just talks about Middle Eastern countries that produce a lot of oil. They start upcharging their product because the supply is not growing, but demand is. So the European Commonwealth just decides to invade a bunch of Middle Eastern countries. They go on a tear through the place that makes the Bush administration look like pacifists, like they're just going all out.
The
Um,
Europeans do this?
the European Commonwealth does this. I'm not entirely sure if that's supposed to mean every member state of the European Union or if it's just a whole other entity altogether. Because the game was written primarily by Americans, there's not a lot of detail put into that. It's just the European Commonwealth. It gets so bad in the Middle East, actually, that terrorists set off a nuclear device that destroys Tel Aviv at one point, and a bunch of countries start getting involved in the area and launching their own nukes. It causes a huge panic because everybody's worried that a full-scale nuclear war is going to break out. But it tends to stay pretty contained to the Middle East and just begins what historians started calling the resource wars. Um, Smaller nations are getting swallowed up in the crossfire. The UN collapses entirely because too many nations pull out of it, and it's so useless at stopping conflicts. So it gets disbanded within the year. Um, the panic about the nuclear exchanges going on leads the United States government to begin something called Project Safe House, which is this wide sweeping program that's supposed to protect the population from global catastrophes, not just nukes, but they mention like pandemics and stuff like that as well. Um, Project Safe House is what was the umbrella project that led to the vaults that we'll get back to in a little bit. And the Vault Tech Corporation worked closely with the government to get it done. It was a complete corrupt bureaucratic nightmare from the get-go, right down to the fact that they only ended up making enough vaults to protect 0.1% of the American population.
Oof.
It wasn't great. There was only, if I remember correctly, 122 vaults that ended up being made. In 2053, just because things weren't bad enough, there's a pandemic that kicks off, that everybody just calls the new plague. The U.S. closes its borders and they implement a national quarantine. The pandemic, the wars, and the energy crisis just kind of continue raging on for the better part of the 2050s. In 2059, the U.S. pressures Canada into allowing them to have a permanent military presence on Canadian soil because they're concerned about the Trans-Alaskan pipeline and just Alaska in general because of its resources. While all this is going on, you still have to keep in mind the context of this new Cold War that's occurring between the U.S. and China. And China is kind of expected to attack Alaska at any point because of its oil deposits. So the U.S. presence there was kind of not something they were going to negotiate with Canada. They were just going to kind of do it anyway. In 2060, fuel becomes so scarce that you start finding alternative energy cars in the public market. So they run, some of them are electric, but some of them run on nuclear fission. If you play some of the Fallout games, you'll notice that cars tend to explode and give off a lot of radiation. It's because they all had like these tiny little nuclear reactors in the back. The wars in the Middle East with the European Commonwealth just kind of stop because the oil deposits are all used up and everybody walks away from it in complete misery, having gained pretty much nothing. The European Commonwealth just dissolves into a big civil war because the members start fighting each other for what's left of their energy resources. The U.S. makes kind of a shift from nuclear fission to fusion, which allows the military to develop the first power armor, but it's kind of garbage when they first make it. By 2063, most of the vaults are done. There's like a handful that only got finished a little bit later, but for the most part, everything's ready to go in 2063. There's a group of people in the US government and in the economy. It's essentially like a deep state. It'll later be called the Enclave once you get into the actual Fallout games. Most of those people were positive that nuclear war was inevitable at some point in the near future. So they started running drills for the vaults immediately, where you either it's not always clear, but it seems to imply usually that what happens is that people had paid for positions to be in the vault, and everybody gets a position kind of like buying a train ticket or something. So they started doing drills where, they would send up all the alarms and the sirens would be going off, and they'd have people come to these certain muster points in the area, and then they'd get shuffled into the vault and then back out again like a big fire drill. An unintended side effect of this is that they started doing these drills so often while the world was in such chaos that it became almost a boy who cried wolf situation, and a lot of people just stopped showing up for the drills and wouldn't show up later.
Oh no.
Yeah. 3 years later, in 2066, the US military started testing out a whole bunch of new next generation nuclear weapons because China is on the verge of collapse at this point. They kind of had their energy collapse a little bit later, but still couldn't avoid it. They start getting more belligerent in trade talks with the US, who refuses to sell them oil because they're filthy commies and they're in a Cold War. The US ends up canceling all the talks. They keep the oil they have for domestic use only, which leads to China invading Anchorage, Alaska, and beginning the Sino-American War. You can pull up a picture of that if you want, Toasty. I think there should be one with the tanks and the soldiers lined up in Alaska. Anyway. At this point, Canada is just continuously getting pressured to accept more U.S. military personnel. There's a U.S. cruiser in Alaska that gets accidentally sunk by a U.S. nuclear submarine, the biggest naval disaster since World War II. Things not going so well in Alaska. The next year, in 2067, the U.S. finally comes up with power armor that doesn't suck, and they start using it in Alaska to great effect. The Chinese try to make their own power armor, but it sucks because communism, I guess. I don't know. The next few years, there's a lot of back and forth. The U.S. makes some progress in Alaska, but it gets more and more expensive as it goes on. So they just start harvesting Canadian resources to keep up with everything.
Nice.
Yeah, wide swaths of timberland just gets destroyed. They're just sucking up oil wherever they can, and it's all going right back into the war effort. As you can imagine, during these years, Canadians are not exactly happy about this, not fond of it at all. There's riots that start occurring in major cities, and the Canadian Armed Forces decide that, well, if the U.S. isn't going to listen to us, well, we're just going to start doing stuff. And they decide they're going to try to blow up the Trans-Alaskan Pipeline, which leads to the U.S. officially annexing Canada in 2072, not as a state, but as a controlled territory, like something more akin to Puerto Rico or whatever. In 2074, the U.S. sort of keeping their position in Alaska, but having other troops that they can expend elsewhere, decides that they're going to send troops right to mainland China and put some pressure on them at home, which turns into a long war of attrition. Trench warfare comes back. There's biological weapons. Just about everything except nukes are being used at that point. By 2076, the U.S. has finished annexing Canada officially, but they're constantly fighting a guerrilla warfare with resistance fighters. And the problem just gets worse because the U.S. keeps doing war crimes against civilians. So there's more people that keep joining the resistance. The U.S. comes up with T-51 power armor, which is even better than what they had before. And it's so effective in Alaska that the Chinese are just retreating, they're surrendering, they can't keep supply lines going. There's just nothing they can do about it. And they get pushed out pretty easily. And then you get to 2077, which is probably the most important year in the Fallout timeline. The Chinese collapse in Alaska is complete. U.S. retakes it entirely, but they're having civil strife back home. It's kind of been going on throughout the war, but it becomes a bigger problem once the war is over. A lot of it is about food scarcity, but there's still a lot of energy scarcity as well. And the U.S. government has the brilliant decision that they're going to start using power armor against civilians that are protesting and rioting.
Oh my God.
So soldiers coming back from Alaska and from mainland China after having like the most ridiculous attrition warfare in all these places come back and they're just expected to start slaughtering their own people in the streets. Desertion becomes a huge problem. There's secessionist movements led by veterans that start popping up all across the U.S. The plague at this point had not really been fixed yet. It was still kind of a problem cooking in the background. But the government had started doing all this research into it, and it spread into weapons research and all these other angles. And some of that research leaks, which leads to widespread rumors that the US government created the virus in the first place, which doesn't help the chaos going on. There's nuclear facilities having accidents that get covered up. There's workers on strike all over the place. And it becomes clear very quickly that nobody is really steering the ship anymore because the president and his inner circle, the deep state, the what would be the enclave later, they just retreat to secure locations because they expect that now is the moment when China is going to start launching nukes because they're about to lose. Like they're about to lose their country as well. And that turns out to be exactly what happens. China launches the first strike. The United States responds in kind. People get called to the vaults and they get sealed away. And then the world is awash in nuclear fire in the course of like a couple hours. Those who survive like the initial blasts start to succumb to radiation and famine and disease. And there's still wars going on everywhere. And, you know, the human race nearly wipes itself out. And that's sort of where we're going to come in. There's a couple centuries usually before the games start, but we'll get into the vaults now that we have mentioned before. So like I said, they were created by Vault Tech, this company that started working closely with the United States government to figure stuff out. It serves a much wider purpose than what was advertised to the public. They had a couple of vaults that weren't going to be used. They were kind of like dioramas just for public demonstration. And it was explained to the American public, you know, if you buy your ticket to get into a vault, if there's a nuclear war, you can live here, you'll be safe, yada, yada, yada. The enclave, the president and his people, all the powerful people in the United States, like I said very early on, were positive there was going to be a nuclear war, and that's why they started the program. But they had a bigger plan than just protecting the population. As it was noted, they didn't really set up enough vaults to protect even 1% of the population. Their big goal was to create a spaceship that would be able to take the best and brightest of humanity somewhere else in the galaxy and colonize a new Earth, because they figured the world was going to be so destroyed that it would be unlikely they'd be able to repopulate the planet. But in order to prepare for space travel and for the colonization efforts, they kind of needed to do a lot of research of how they would be able to organize that so that it would be most likely to succeed. They needed to know how human societies would function under a variety of external and internal threats. So most of the vaults just ended up being these horrific social experiments. You carefully control who goes into what vaults and what equipment's going to be there. and what things are going to be designed to break down after a certain amount of time, and yada yada. It kind of ranges from like brutally scientific to absolutely 60 IQ level dumbassery. Toasty, would you mind pulling up a picture of a Garden of Eden creation kit?
So, hang on, Astro, I got a question for you.
Got time. We got time while we wait for the picture.
All right. So, what? Okay. So, I'm just
Yes.
trying to comprehend the stupidity here.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of leaps of just like there's other options you could have like what? Okay, so here's the question though. Like I kind of understand like from a philosophical point the idea of the vaults, but at the
Right.
same time, you think the effort that went into like designing these vaults could have went into like I don't mean like design the vaults themselves, but like the experiments alone, right? Like you're mentioning something breaking down in a specific time, right? Like who had to
yes.
be, what resources were spent to make someone do the research to know when something was supposed to break down to induce the proper effects, right? Like that's a paycheck someone earned.
Well, it's just sort of planned obsolescence. I should specify that it's not always clear precisely what time something would break down. It's just to the degree that they would sometimes, in a certain vault, set it up so that a certain system wouldn't function properly to begin with, or they would have some kind of issue with it that you could expect somewhere in the next 20, 30 years. It's going to break down. And sometimes that also happened and wasn't part of the equation. We're going to
Yeah,
get
just
into
like
some of those vaults where that happened. Most of the actual experimentation comes more from what kind of people they chose to go in which vaults and what kind of stuff they put in there for them.
All right,
There
let me
Side
ask.
note,
Yeah.
this is America.
I was gonna say, let me ask a couple of meta questions here. When did the first Fallout game actually release?
97, I believe. Let me just double check that. Yes, 97.
If I were to, at the risk of sounding, I think they made their predictions just a little too late. If that makes sense.
It's there wasn't a lot of new material necessarily used in this. Like it was, if you play any of the Fallout games, but especially the first couple of them, you notice that they're kind of these homages to a lot of stuff that came before it. There's a lot of Mad Max references. There's like some Doctor Who in there. Like there's all kinds of bits and pieces. It has a disturbing but kind of jokey atmosphere at the same time.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I actually have like a lot of even Lovecraftian
Oh yes,
stuff.
absolutely.
Like I mean, a lot of this I understand is kind of told from like almost a comedic standpoint. But then you look at how things are going on in this day and age, and you're just like, oh no.
Spot on.
We're almost
you see
there,
that,
boys.
yeah, you
Space
can really
Marines
see
are coming.
it has that 40K element to it, where if you make a story and you base it on negative aspects of humanity that are well established throughout history, you end up creating stories that maybe don't exactly capture what happens in the future, but they certainly reflect a lot of things that make sense.
And like I was saying, just like a lot of this was going on in like the 2050s, the 2060s, the 2070s. My brother in Grugny, this is 2025, and look at all the stuff that's going on in the world.
We're almost
Well,
there.
hopefully we get the nuclear powered cars. That sounds pretty cool.
I mean, that doesn't sound like a bad idea, but I digress.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
There's
The
lots
way
of
they
room for
explained it was kind of a
digression.
bad idea.
They're too efficient.
Don't worry, it'll be fantastic.
Don't ask questions.
They never blow up. Don't worry about that. It's
Never.
never happened. A car has never exploded in public.
What, to be fair,
Spontaneously, of course not.
No. And a
these
nuclear
cars that
reactor
were
has
blowing
never
up in the
melted down.
games are how old at that point? 100,
Yeah.
200 years old?
And to be fair, the games like really undersell just how devastating radiation is. Like you can
Be
blow up a nuclear
fine.
reactor in like a car and you'll be standing like 20 feet away and you get a little bit of radiation and that's about it. You have a launcher that you can launch mini nukes with, kind of like those handheld ones that they were using in the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's kind of jokey. It has that kind of flavor
What's
to it.
the multi? Is it the Merv? Is that what it's called?
No, it's I think the launcher is called the Fat Man, and the
Yeah, the
nukes are the
Fat
little
Man.
boy. Yeah, the Fat Man.
But
The little boy.
there's one that shoots multiple, and it's called like the Merv or something.
Oh yes, that's. Hang on a sec. Yeah, I think that one might have come out only in 4. It might be in one of the earlier ones, but yeah,
Oh, I thought it was 3. Jeez.
it
been so
might
long.
be in 3 as well. It's been a while since I played 3, honestly. I haven't really played 4. I've just seen a lot of it.
All right, so I'll ask
yeah.
this too while you're getting that ready. Are we going to be discussing anything from the show, or are we going to be kind of primarily just focusing on the game timeline?
Well, I was essentially just gonna go through. There's a very nicely summarized list on one of the fandoms of the vaults, where they are, what their purpose was, and other details. And I'm just gonna kind of pull stuff from pages and go through it. That will involve mentions from the various games and from the show. For the most part, I'm probably not going to comment too much on the plot unless there's questions about it or it's needed for the context. Feel free to ask any questions that you like. I can't promise I necessarily know all of them, but we have the power of the internet to help us out. Hang on a sec. Can you get Toasty? Can you get a picture of the Gek itself?
Oh, the little machine.
Yeah, like the thing itself. It's like a suitcase that you can use. It has a terraforming kit within it that can turn like a decent swath of territory into fertile land that'll help support human life. Oh yeah, now we're talking. Yeah. In theory, every vault was supposed to have one of these because after a certain amount of time, they were going to have to open the vault and come back to the surface. Each vault kind of was given its own timeline as to when that should be. There were some that were supposed to open up after like 20 years, and there are others that were supposed to be opening like 100 years later. Obviously, because some of the vaults are tests, and that has a different goal, not every vault ended up getting a Gek, as far as I'm aware. I should mention also that after some time, the Enclave basically abandoned the idea of making a big spaceship because it just wasn't feasible. So
crimes they committed.
yeah, it's just the ship wasn't viable. But you know, we still have all these experiments going on, and we're gonna need the data for when we rebuild civilization on Earth anyway. So there's really no reason to stop doing the horrible things.
Didn't a large swath of the Enclave escape to like a oil drill, basically?
That's where the president went,
Okay.
as I recall. The oil rig ends up being very important in Fallout 2. It's where the climax happens.
Okay.
With President Richardson, I think it is, who's not the guy who was the president when the disaster occurred. But yeah, the Enclave sort of runs its thing. They had the oil rig, they have Navarro, they have a few key bases where all their personnel went, and they still have a president who's like theoretically in charge, but it's a whole other political system. They don't really vote. It's just kind
Basically,
of a quasi.
patriarchy.
It's kind of like just this really weird quasi militaristic sort of state. It's strange because there's also not very many of them. It was just a small group of people to begin with, and as the games make clear over time, they kind of don't really have an intent to increase their numbers because they don't consider most of the humans that live in the wasteland to be pure enough anymore. Their plan over time is essentially to genocide most of who's left that isn't them and isn't from a vault, just so they don't have to deal with all the crazy mutations and whatnot affecting the human gene pool. Yeah,
So
okay. So
basically, all they're missing was the God Emperor of Mankind.
yeah, if you want to imagine that Fallout does exist in the 40K timeline, the Emperor was probably one of those people in the Enclave. Yeah, he was
the
probably.
president.
He was the president.
He was
He was
one
the
of
president.
the presidents. Yeah,
He went
certainly
over there and
one
he
of
was
the
like, if we just sit here long enough, guys, and then we just start killing the rest of these weird people that are out here, we'll collect all the normal ones.
This is where like the part of the Emperor's personality that would later be the Black Templars came from, of just like, we got to purge all this stuff, man. We got to get rid of this stuff.
Any of the stuff? Not good. I want it all
Yeah.
gone.
Mutated stuff, no good, no good. By the way, all those people that we irradiated and mutated on purpose for science, them too, they gotta go. It doesn't matter.
Do you see those irradiated mutants out there? Yes, sir. I don't want to.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Very
so
good, sir.
I think there is obviously a Vault 1 and 2, but I don't think they were covered in the lore. So we're kind of just gonna start with Vault 3. Bit of a tragedy, not a whole lot of existential horror necessarily, but Vault 3 it's in New Vegas, the game, because it's in the Mojave Wasteland. It was one of the control groups, because not every vault was a social experiment. Some of them were just supposed to host large numbers of people, and they were supposed to survive as untouched as possible for as long as possible. There were 17 control vaults, if I remember the number correctly. For decades after the nuclear apocalypse, things were going pretty well for Vault 3 until they had a water leak that messed with their water system, and it forced the residents to open the vault so they could talk to people and find help and, get the problem sorted out. They started trading with other communities and establishing all these connections, and it was working pretty well. It was pretty peaceful. But because of all the trade that went on, they kind of brought the attention of a group of people known as the Fiends. They're a particular raider group that's kind of defined by the fact that they're crackheads. Like, they're all drugged up. Not a nice. Yeah, bring a picture up. That'd be a good idea. Show us what the Fiends look like there. Give the audience at home a good visual. Yeah, they're not nice people. Those three in particular are not nice people. Those are people in a side quest.
Are you kidding? They all look friend-shaped.
Yeah, the chick snipes people and she has dogs. She's like a hunter, but for humans kind of thing. The guy in the middle is named Cook. You can't see, but he's holding a flamethrower. More of a napalm thrower, honestly.
Yeah.
He has a. Let's see, we're on YouTube, so let me figure out how to word this. He has a tendency to make unwanted advances. He makes offers you can't refuse with captured people.
Oh no.
Yeah, he has a big reputation for that, to the point where the NCR, one of the factions, the New California Republic, they're kind of trying to recreate the American system after the apocalypse. They're the closest to pre-war America. The NCR at one point in New Vegas, if you go to pick up the quest, it's a side quest. One of the guys there, one of the officers, tasks you with killing these three raiders specifically and bringing back their heads to prove that they're dead. The middle guy there, Cook. There are people at the base who explicitly state that if they were going up against his raider group and everybody else is dead or it looks like they're about to lose, they're just going to end it. They're not going to risk getting captured by Cook and his people. The guy on the right is named Driver Nafai. He has the name Driver because he's holding a golf club, as you can see. That's his main weapon.
And it's a driver.
Yeah, it's not very creative, these guys generally, but he kills people with a golf club. He's got his way about him. Yeah, so these guys, the fiends, the crackhead raiders here, they get drawn to Vault 3 because of all the trade. And the Vault Dwellers are really naive. They're not very security conscious. So the Fiends con themselves into the Vault and they kill everybody and claim the Vault for themselves.
Trojan horse.
Yeah, sort of. It's sort of a Trojan horse. They didn't really need the horse part. They just kind of went up and said, "Hey, let us in. We're nice and we want to trade." And they just said, "Yeah, sure." And that's basically what happened. When you play New Vegas, you can visit Vault 3 and you can see the remains because it's basically just the base camp for the Fiends after that point.
The
so
whole setup
much
around it.
Yeah, they have their own little thing. There's all kinds of drugs inside. It's
Get
a
your
whole
chems,
production.
baby. Some
All the
psycho.
chems. A lot of psycho. A lot of psycho. For context, that's like, how would you even describe that in real world terms? It's kind of like pure roid rage, I guess. Would be
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like roids mixed with crack.
Yeah, like it's not even like roids. It's just the rage. It's roid rage with crack. It's bad. The next vault will be Vault 4. This is from the TV show. It was one of the publicly known vaults, which was advertised as a society that was going to be governed exclusively by scientists with no other oversight. You can imagine, especially with Vault Tech, that that's probably not a nice place to be. They immediately, as soon as everybody was in that vault, just immediately started running experiments on people who I guess weren't useful for other purposes within the vault, weren't smart enough or whatever, or weren't skilled enough at anything. They even started taking people from outside. They opened up the vault and they would lure in people from the wasteland and just do all kinds of crazy human experiments on them, including trying to hybridize humans with radiation resistant creatures, which led to the creation of something called a gulper. If you want to grab a picture of that, Toasty, just look up Fallout gulper. Should probably get a decent picture of that.
Which one you want?
Any which one you want. They're like weird lizard things. Giant.
They are
things.
giant salamanders.
Yeah. Oh, cool. I didn't actually realize they were in one of the games. Okay, yeah. So they look a little bit different in the show.
Were you thinking of the show one? I got
Yeah, I was thinking of the show one because it has like, they have these weird.
He looks more like an axolotl.
Yeah, exactly. And they have these weird, those little appendages are actually fingers, especially in the mouth. So they grab a hold of you with their jaws, and then the fingers like pull you in further, kind of thing.
Extra hugs.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's terrible. They're obviously extremely carnivorous. That's a good picture right there. Yeah. Very eldritch. Very 40K.
Very eldritch. I want to pet it.
There's like hands as well, not just fingers. I'm not sure if it's in this picture, but they get weird appendages, and the eyes have like a human quality to them. There's
pet this creature.
Yeah, you really don't.
Yeah, they're in 76 and 4. And 4 they're in it's like a Point Lookout DLC. I think it's called Far Harbor.
Yeah, Far Harbor. That's the lake one.
Point Lookout, I think Point Lookout's also in 3, but it's a different...
Point Lookout's in 3. It was Point Lookout-esque.
Yeah,
Far Harbor is 4's version of Point Lookout. Sorry.
Point Lookout's also that's a nice little tale too. It's just all the hillbillies there,
and that's a big Lovecraftian thing.
It's kind of like Lovecraftian, like rural Kentucky, really, if you really think about it.
Because it plays into the Dunwich horrors.
It does. It plays very much into that story. Whoever like was taking lead on that DLC had like a lot of experience with Lovecraft.
Yes, sir.
So in the show, there's actually a scene when they're at Vault 4, because a couple of the characters visit it. I'm not going to get too much into what they do there. It's not really relevant to the plot, but they do find a video while they're there, which is like an old experiment video. And it shows like a pregnant woman half submerged in water, like the lower half of her is in water. And she gives birth to a bunch of gulpers that are much smaller. They look like gecko lizards at that point, or like piranhas or something. And as soon as she gives birth to them, they eat her alive. It's not great. The nature of this experiment and a bunch of others leads most of the people in that vault who were not the scientists to revolt against the scientists, and they eventually manage to overthrow them. They make the vault into this democratic refuge. They take in people from the outside. They take in people with mutations. They try to use what scientific research exists in the vault's records to help undo conditions with people. It just becomes like a fairly decent place, all things considered, after the fact.
Well, nice to know there's some good vaults out there, but it sounds like with all these experiments and these 60s and 50s nut job mindsets, that's
Just to give you an idea of how terrible golfers were,
Oh yeah,
they'd hang upside down in trees and
Mhm.
wait for prey. They don't, well, like in the show, he's in a bog or whatever and he pops out.
the water.
Yeah, but in the game, they hang off trees and stuff. You don't, gamers don't look up. So all of a sudden you walk underneath this thing and it jumps on your head.
Kind of
And
like
it's
that
10 foot
creature in
tall.
Half-Life 1, where it's like the big barnacle on the ceiling and it has a tongue that sticks down and grabs you.
Yeah, kind of.
Terrible. Terrible. Hate that stuff. Vault 8 is actually a pretty good one. This one's not too miserable. If you want to look up Toasty, Vault City, which is what it later became known as. Vault 8 was another one of those that was supposed to, it wasn't really like, they didn't screw with it. It was just kind of set up for people to survive, but they were supposed to open and recolonize some of the surface only 10 years after it was sealed. So they also got a head start on setting things up. They were actually supposed to have 2 Geks so they could transform more of the surface, but there were like logistical issues. So they ended up getting like a bunch of extra water chips, which were meant for a different vault that we'll get into later.
So Vault City's Fallout 1 and 2, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. You can see in the picture there, you can see the Fallout 1 and 2 had that Diablo sort of angle to it.
OG Diablo, yeah.
Yeah, this is a nice zoom out, though. You don't get to see nearly as much of the map in the game. But
now you said this one.
Sorry,
now
yeah.
you
Go
said,
ahead.
yeah. Now you said this this particular vault was only opened up 10 years after everything went down.
That's right.
So I imagine they still had a metric fuck ton of radiation stuff they have to deal with, because like
I don't think where they were was too bad.
Well, that's the thing. It's kind of a couple of factors, because yeah, you could say that also it wasn't an area maybe that had as much radiation, even though it probably was, because it's in California, which was
California.
hit.
I thought it was Nevada.
No, Vault 8 is in California, because it's in Fallout 2, which is in sorry, no, you're right. No, it's New California. That's what it is. It's
part of the New California Republic.
Nevada. Yeah, it's technically part of Nevada. It's in New California.
Okay.
But the other thing also is that it's kind of implied. I don't think it's outright stated. It's kind of just implied in the Fallout universe that everywhere is irradiated to a certain level, and that by the time the games start, people just kind of have adapted to it or whatever. Like, radiation is simultaneously disastrous and really bad, but also not as threatening as it would be in the real world, so to speak. Because Vault City is totally fine. It's everybody there has like crazy stats. There's a lot of doctors there. They have these crazy security setups. Like raiders can't go anywhere near the place because they just get lit up. It's just like a real group of elitist jerks. They let certain people in if you have like impossibly high stats and certain skills, and you can pass a medical exam. You can gain citizenship in Vault City, but it's incredibly difficult to do. It's much easier if you just do a bunch of stupid quests and stuff like that. But it's like a little slice of, you could call it paradise if you're part of the upper class of it, because there's two classes within the city. There's the people they let in to do work and stuff like that, and then there's the cast that's actual citizens in sort of a more dystopian Starship Troopers kind of thing. Like there's a class that has military training and is skilled in stuff, and they have rights, they can vote on stuff. And then there's like an underclass, but they're all basically indentured servants in Vault City. And there's like a community outside the walls as well that's full of people that want to get in but aren't good enough or whatever. It comes into play a little bit with the plot of 2, not to a huge degree. Not something we need to go further into, especially because nothing bad really happens there unless you destroy the place, as a lot of players end up doing, but that's a whole other matter. Next, we're
War
going.
crimes.
What's that?
Is it war crimes?
Oh yeah, pretty much.
Always.
It's kind of impossible to play a Fallout game without eventually just saying, you know what? Maybe I can kill everybody on the map. Maybe I can do that. Vault City would be hard to do, though, I have to say, unless you get like the late stage power armor and all kinds of stuff like that, because they got all these turrets and good security and stuff. The
Actually
next.
put up a fight.
They do. They put up an extreme fight. They do not screw around there. And you run into it at a fairly early level, so it's not the kind of place that you are going to want to start problems in. Vault 11 is what we're going to cover next. Vault 11 might be my personal favorite, just because of how dark and tragic it is. It is one of the purest social experiment ones. So, after the blast doors are sealed, the vault computer, because they all work with a computer system, right? The computer informs the overseer. Every vault has, an overseer. It informs the overseer that the inhabitants of the vault have to sacrifice someone every year, or else everybody dies. The overseer kind of, I guess, is assumed that he either kept this from them for a little bit, or the people blamed him for it, or whatever, because the first person they pick to die is the overseer.
Damn.
He goes into this room that essentially just like, there's like guns in the walls, and there's a robot, I think, and you just get
Wait, was this the one in New Vegas?
It's in New Vegas. It is. Don't spoil it. Don't spoil it.
They chose the overseer first? I don't even remember that.
They did. It's in the logs. Like, it happened early on.
Yeah.
Once you go into the place, you're kind of confused as to what happened. There's dead bodies at the very beginning. Then you start running to all these other skeletons, and you start picking up the logs and putting stuff together. There's all these election posters all over the wall. It looks like a big electoral season or something happened in here. And you can put it all together with the logs. What essentially happened is that, okay, so they chose the first overseer to die. And then what they did was every year they vote in the overseer, and the overseer will die. He's going to be the sacrifice every time. The overseer, it's not stated how long they get between election and death, but it's presumed you get like a little bit of time. But you know that if you get picked overseer, it means you're dying, and probably soon.
All I remember is this place pissed me off.
It's yeah. So what happens or at least what happened before you showed up, obviously, because everybody's, dead. All these voting blocks began to form. There's the Allied Service Workers block, the Divine Will, Human Dignity, the Justice block, United Vault Technicians, Utilitarians, all that, They're all jostling for power. They're playing the game. And they support different people to be overseer based on their own goals. And they're the ones that put all the election posters everywhere. And then there was the final overseer. So what happened was, obviously, like in any system that involves voting, corruption becomes a big part of this after a certain stretch of time. The Justice block is led by a guy named Roy, and he approaches a woman named Catherine. And essentially what he and his political friends do is they threaten her that if she doesn't, I'll word this correctly, if she doesn't do certain favors for all of the people in that voting block, they're going to nominate her husband as overseer and he'll die.
Damn.
So she does it. She does all those favors for who knows how many people. I think there was like 100 people in the vault when they started. And in the end, those people go ahead and they vote to kill her husband anyway, even though she did all that.
Oh, man.
So she becomes a serial killer, basically, and one by one starts killing all the people in that voting block. It gets chaotic. There's like sort of a civil strife going in. People start attacking each other physically. It just becomes chaos. But because everybody knows that she started doing these murders, that she did all this stuff, she admits it freely when she gets caught. They decide that, the fitting thing is they'll make her overseer next so that she dies, right? A little capital punishment kind of thing.
I mean, that just sounds like the perfect way to punish somebody is just, oh, you did this. Okay, you're going to get voted next as overseer.
And at the start, that's probably what they did. They probably just every year picked the worst person as overseer. It's just that once it got to the point where there were all these voting blocks, it wasn't really a matter of choosing for good reasons anymore. It was just the powerful people are going to choose the people they want. And that one guy decided that he was going to turn this woman into everybody's toy and betrayed her anyway. So they make her the overseer, and she immediately issues an overseer order because the overseers have a certain degree of authority with the system of vaults, right? And she essentially dissolves the election process. She makes it so that every year a random number generator will decide who becomes overseer. The people from the voting blocks are obviously upset that they're going to lose all their control and influence over the population now. So they start an armed coup to get rid of her, and this civil war kills everyone except for 5 of the population. So there's only 5 people left in the vault. Whatever sides they were on, because there's only like 5 of them left, they all laid down their arms, and they went into the sacrificial chamber where all the bullets fly out. And their plan is essentially that they're just all going to choose to be the sacrifice at the same time. They're so confused and horrified about everything that's happened. They're just all going to go in and, suicide pact it, right? And so they go in there and say, it's going to be all 5 of us. We refuse to vote for a sacrifice. And then the computer's automated message says, congratulations for being a good group of people. There's no punishment. They never had to vote for anybody in the first place. There never had to be sacrifices. It was just a big test. So those 5, having absolutely no idea of what to make of that, just go to the entrance of the vault where you first found all the bodies when you came in, and they make a log, a record discussing that they're all going to kill themselves to punish themselves for everything that happened and to prevent the outside world from, learning about just how bad it got. They didn't know about all these other logs that you'd be able to piece together. And you can hear them discussing this in the log about how they're all going to end it and can't live with what happened. And then there's 4 gunshots, but the 5th one just drops his gun and leaves the vault. It's unknown where he went or what happened to him. There are some fan theories about him being various characters, but it's never explicitly stated.
He's going to be the dad from the TV show.
Yeah, some people said that. Some people say that it's the courier, the character from New Vegas, that he left when he was young or something. There's a lot of theories about who it was. But yeah, so huge social experiment. They never had to sacrifice anybody. The moment they refused to vote on somebody, the computer says, congratulations for being such good people. There's no punishment. You guys can leave the vault anytime you want. But they were afraid of doing that. So for like 16 years, they were constantly just voting on people. And then they had the Civil War and all this crazy stuff going on. Maybe my favorite vault. It is an experience discovering it for the first time.
Whew. I mean, tragic.
Are there any questions about that one?
All that, and I thought they were just like, somebody has to die so the rest of us can eat. I must not have got all the logs or just didn't pay attention enough when I was getting them.
There is some eating going on in some of the other ones, I believe. It comes up here and there in Fallout.
Unless I'm talking about a different one, but I'm pretty sure this is Fallout.
I'm being attacked by my cat. Anyway, if there's no questions about that one, we can move on to Vault 12, which is from Fallout 1. If you're looking it up, you can just write Necropolis, because that's what it's better known as in Fallout 1.
Now, remind us again, like how many vaults were there in total, or do we actually know a exact number?
There were, unless it's been retconned, there are supposed to be 122.
I think that's still canon, I believe.
Not all of them are numbered or accounted for in the lore. It's kind of like, the Lost Primarchs thing. Like, a lot of the numbers are just not ever mentioned, and you're just up to the imagination kind of thing.
Okay.
And
you
there's
kind of
assume,
that there's like this many because like they're in Fallout 4, there's a Vault 111, right? So you can kind of assume that there is at least 100 and 110 other vaults out there that are in some way operational. Like they can be in various levels of like development or inhabitants.
like as far as this list is concerned, the last, numerically the last canonical one is 118, but it's stated elsewhere there are 122. Keep in mind, because that makes it much more interesting, that only 17 of these vaults were intended to be totally normal with nothing wrong with them. Only 17 of them were control groups.
They thought of 100. They thought of 101 other ways to commit war crimes and need to test it.
It's you know what? The power of science will take you everywhere.
This sounds like Operation Paperclip on steroids.
Sort of. It would be it wouldn't make sense timeline wise, but if the nuclear war had happened earlier, I would absolutely assume that canonically speaking, some of those scientists were involved because it's that kind of thing. This is Joseph Mengele stuff.
Exactly. But
so this picture here. Oh, sorry. Go on.
One more quick question. Does it establish like how big each of these vaults are, or does it just depend on which one? Because it sounds like I know of a couple of vaults that Ray had spoken to me about beforehand where like there's at least 1,000 people in each vault. Or so does it just depend on the vault, or like how big are we talking here? Because you got to have like a sizable, big enough to at least have some sizable population.
It depends entirely on the vault in question. I believe the show attempts to make it more standardized, but there's obviously still room for differences because obviously they're serving different purposes. I don't know if it's explicitly stated, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that the vaults, which were meant to be just control groups where nothing was wrong, are probably fairly bigger. Just because if they're meant to survive for a certain, like for quite a while, you kind of have to have enough people to have the genetic diversity needed to make that work.
And even then, like if the show's saying like, oh, there's only this many people per vault, like they don't actually know.
Yeah. There's also a lot of that. Yeah, there's a lot of lies. There's a lot of outright lies and
I'll say that it's like the Imperium being like, orcs easy to kill.
Yeah, it has that. It has that flavor of the Administratum just being like, yeah, there's probably 1 million people on that world, 30,000 light years away. There's probably 1 million people on it.
It looks busy from here.
Yeah, that last shipment we sent to this guard regiment probably had at least 1 million las rifles. Probably.
That should be enough to defend them against the orcs that are super easy to kill.
Yeah, there's like 5 billion guardsmen in the system, but 1 million las rifles would be fine. They take turns,
Right, some of y'all got to share your las rounds.
Yeah, you're gonna have that like enemy at the gates thing. There's like 1 las rifle for every 5 guys, and the other dudes just carry extra batteries and stuff. Yeah.
Oh, I got this rock.
There's definitely some 40K influence in Fallout. There's definitely, even if it's not always explicit, but there you can feel it. You can feel the influence there.
Back in my day, we had a rock and 2 sticks between the whole platoon, and we had to share the rock.
Some like retired 80-year-old Catachan jungle fighter just talking about the guerrilla wars he used to have to fight. There was that guy, Colonel Ironhand, was that his name? Straken, something like that. He was a guard officer. He was like a colonel, and he strangled a Night Lord with a root, like a spiky root on the ground. Just amazing.
And then Catachan guardsmen are just something else.
It's a different way of life for sure.
Well, when everybody in your guard regiment is freaking Sylvester Stallone from First Blood, it's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. If there's anybody who should be able to pull that off as a baseline human, it would absolutely be a guardsman. He also has like a robot arm as well, so there's something going on there. There's some extra strength.
I want to say that's Strachan, Colonel Strachan. Does that sound
Strachan.
right?
Yeah, his nickname was Iron Hand. That's all I remember was Colonel Iron Hand. Yeah, Strachan. That's the guy.
Yep, that's
absolute Chad. Yeah, you'll notice him in a lot of artwork because he's the Catachan that's shirtless with a robot arm.
We in the regiment just called him Stroking.
Oh boy.
Of course.
We made it so far without the Toasty jokes.
Just barely an hour, over an hour. That's okay.
Oh, that is a personal GrimLore record. Let's just admire this.
It's any % world record run,
You're welcome.
Okay. This picture doesn't really necessarily do justice to the thing, just because every town in Fallout kind of looks like that.
Yeah, let's say that was all that Fallout 1 was this over and over again.
When you go to this place in Fallout 1, it's just called Necropolis. You don't even realize there's a vault underneath there at first. Everybody there is a ghoul. In the Fallout universe, you'll run into these guys, ghouls. I'm sure that you could find a decent picture there, Toasty. They're basically just super irradiated humans. They have like gravelly voices. They look like they're all melted. They're just people that endured like an unfathomable amount of radiation, but are still alive. Yeah, that's a pretty good example of one of them right there.
Don't zoom in too much.
They look kind of like the Iron Maiden mascot. They just kind of look like the zombie guy.
It kind of does, actually.
Yeah.
That's probably what it's based on, but not too closely, because Iron Maiden likes to sue people, so probably not too closely, but
legally distinct Iron Maiden, thank you.
Yeah, legally distinct zombie.
Well, then ghoul came from Lovecraft.
Is that word invented by Lovecraft?
I don't know if it was invented by him, but it was
He has ghouls in his work for sure.
he popularized it at least.
I was
Okay.
gonna say ghoul. A
Yeah,
ghoul is a much older
that's like a
mythological creature.
medieval
So
term, I think. Yeah.
yeah, that's like a medieval Arabic term. So
Yeah.
But anyway, you can just imagine the ghouls in Fallout as kind of just like self-aware zombies. They behave much like normal people. They're just impervious to radiation, and they always look like that.
Well,
So
they,
this
kind of-
Decent
they
trade-off.
act like normal people up to a certain extent.
Yeah, there's a difference between regular ghouls and feral ghouls. Because feral ghouls are just crazy. They're just crackheads. They don't talk, they just attack and stuff. They're
okay,
just crazy.
so the ghoul from the show, played by Walton Goggins, that's one of the regular
just
ghouls.
It's a regular
Yeah.
guy. That's right.
Okay,
Great character, by the way. Best part of the show, honestly.
that's what I've been
Um,
hearing.
Besides the creatures in it.
That's he's pretty great. So this place, Necropolis, is called that because everybody there is a ghoul. And what you find out is that it's because their vault underneath, Vault 12, was an experiment of its own. It was built with everything you could possibly need, all the food, all the amenities. It had the best water purification systems. It even was able to take waste from a nearby sewer system and purify the water into drinking water. It could do like 15,000 gallons of it a day. Just absolutely fantastic. However, that was not the plans that Vault-Tec had for Vault 12. As a matter of fact, it was designed to study the effects of radiation. So they designed the door to not close all the way. That big circular door, it didn't close all the way. It just was a little bit open.
Let that wind in.
Yeah, just leave the door cracked, just a little bit. They certainly tried their best, but obviously the door didn't work. Radiation flooded in. A lot of people died. The ones who didn't became ghouls, and they just kind of left the shelter and made this city above the vault. A lot of people just left entirely and went to walk the wasteland, but it was not a bad idea if you're a ghoul, because I mean you're impervious to radiation. You can go a lot of places that maybe other people can't. When you get to it in Fallout 1, there's like a somewhat tyrannical guy who seized power over who is left in Necropolis, and they drove out the original overseer and stuff like that. Oh yeah, just a quick side note about ghouls I forgot to mention. Ghouls are like functionally immortal. They usually go crazy after a couple centuries, but they're technically immortal. So a lot of the people in Necropolis are probably still the original residents of the vault.
Ooh.
Yeah, they live a long time.
That's another reason some of them lose their mind.
Yeah, it's up until the show, I don't think it was confirmed that it's like inevitable they'll go insane, but obviously the implication was always there that you walk around long enough, you just kind of lose your mind eventually and go nuts. If they get dementia like regular people, you can imagine that if you live 300 years, eventually you're going to lose your mind, kind of thing.
Did Fallout 3 Charon, didn't he say something about that?
Huh?
And wasn't that his name? Fallout 3, the ghoul you could befriend.
Point Lookout?
No, he was in OG Fallout 3. You can find him outside the hotel that wants you to blow up Nuketown.
Oh, the guy that wants to like get in?
Yeah, I think you can get him as a follower.
Yes. Yeah, I think he says something about that. He does say something about losing your mind.
Where it's just a fact of getting too friggin' old, basically.
I think I think you're right about that. I think that guy does mention something about that. I forgot all about that follower.
Can't believe it.
That's why I gotta have the co-host. That's why I gotta have Toasty here. You see.
Well, I mean, it makes sense though, right? Like
It does.
you live like 200, 300 years.
You go nuts.
You're not going to be the same person. Even if you don't go insane, you're still going to be a little different.
Yeah, like that's there's that whole thing in like Interview with the Vampire where there's that group of vampires that go nuts because if you live more than a couple centuries, you can't fit into society anymore and you start to go a little nuts.
Yeah, but then there was Vampire Lestat, and he lived way too damn long.
Yeah, but he was crazy from the start, so
Yeah,
he was
that's
just
true.
he was enjoying it. He was loving it. Then he became a rock star in like the 80s. He was living his best life. He was living his best life.
If you go by the movies, he got to hook up with Aaliyah, so win-win, I guess.
He does his own thing. Yeah, so that's basically it for Necropolis there for Vault. What did I say? Vault 12. Yeah, Vault. That's it for Vault 12 basically. There's like a minor power struggle when you go there in Fallout 1 because there's a brutal guy in charge and there's a more peaceful guy who wants to take over. There's a bit of that, but it's not super important here. The next one is Vault 13, maybe the most important one in the series from a certain perspective, because it's the one from Fallout 1. It's the vault you're from. And I mentioned it briefly earlier when we were talking about Vault 8, which became Vault City, because Vault City was supposed to get 2 Gex, right? But a logistical error ended with them getting just a bunch of extra water purifier chips. Vault 13 was supposed to get those water chips, but instead got an extra Garden of Eden creation kit. Vault 13 had a problem because their water chip basically stopped working. And I guess because they were supposed to get the extra chips, it's assumed that the designers of Vault 13 knew that the water purification system was kind of screwy. So that's why they wanted to send all those extra parts, but they didn't get them. You leave Vault 13 at the beginning of Fallout 1 because the water isn't working anymore. And the overseer picks someone who's supposed to go out and find a new water chip, and you have like 150 in-game days to find a new water chip. It becomes like a place of reverence after that. They even start calling it the Vault of the Holy 13 among a certain tribe in Fallout 2, just because the Vault Dweller who leaves Vault 13 in the first game and comes back later, at the end of Fallout 1, when you get back, if you do like the good ending or whatever, when you get back with the water chip, the overseer says, it's really great that you did this for us, and now the vault will continue to live. Problem is, this vault was not supposed to be opened for like a long time. This is like a regular vault, a control vault where nothing was wrong or was supposed to be wrong. They're supposed to sit tight for a long time, and the overseer is like, you can't stay here anymore because if you start telling people about stuff you saw in the wasteland, it's going to inspire people to want to leave, and that can't happen. So at the end of the game, he just kicks you out of the vault, and the Vault Dweller goes on to be like a figure of myth and legend in California, or New California, I should say.
Are any factions inspired by him?
The Vault Dweller?
Honestly, I don't know anything about Vault 1 or Fallout 1 and 2, so.
There's the Vault Dweller in the first game. When he leaves, he wanders for a bit, but he also founds a village nearby, which is called Arroyo. And in Fallout 2, you play a tribes member of that village. So there is like a community that was founded by that original guy. That's what you mean.
Yeah, that's true.
You right?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm here.
So, unless there's any more questions for 13, we'll move on. At some point, I might start skipping some of these if they're not important.
I mean,
Just
I
to
think
pull
like if
me in
it's
an
not
exo.
or like there's not a major story about it, it can be kind of skipped, or like for the sake of brevity, it can be like generally covered quickly.
Episode
Yeah,
34. Vaults
I'll be real.
continued.
Yeah, I'll be real. When I started like skimming through the list when I was making my notes and stuff like that, I was like, man, there's not many vaults. I'm going to pass through them too quickly. There's going to be no time for all this. But there's a lot more to say than I thought. The next one, we are going to cover them.
You say that we're an hour and a half in. We're almost an hour and a half in.
I kind of expected that most of them would be done by now. I thought I wouldn't have much to say about most of them. Vault 15, the next one, is kind of important though, so we're going to cover that. Not because of what happened in it, I'll just cover it quickly, but essentially, Vault 15 was not necessarily a control vault, but it kind of wasn't designed super maliciously. They put in a bunch of people of differing cultures and ethnicities in it, and they had them wait longer before the doors would open, just because they wanted to see what would happen, socially speaking, which ended with everybody kind of segregating themselves into their own area and being somewhat standoffish, and there was a bit of a fight. But eventually it did open up, and the different groups kind of all went to do different things. The most important was one of them founded a village called Shady Sands, which later became the New California Republic. It's where it started, basically. And all the others...
where it ended.
And where it ended. And all the other people, all the other factions from that vault became raider groups. So... yeah. We're going to skip Vault 17 because all it was a place where inhabitants were kidnapped and they were transformed into super mutants.
That's semi-important. Is that where what's his name came from?
It's not where the master is. No, we're going to get to his vault later. Don't worry about it.
What about Horgan?
No, I don't think Horgan's from there because the people that were using Vault 17 to make super mutants were Unity. It was the Masters group.
Okay.
And I'll kind of summarize him once we get to one of those other areas where that matters.
I didn't play his old ones, but I know Horgan's character.
Frank Horgan is a pretty cool character, that's for sure. Vault 19, not super important. It's also in Nevada, so it's also in New Vegas. It was a social experiment to study the effects of factionalism and creating paranoia and mistrust. So they had people divided into blue and red sectors, and they just put up a bunch of subliminal messages and faked acts of sabotage and stuff like that. They just gaslit like a bunch of people into hating each other.
I invented this vault.
Yeah, because
it sounds like a Toasty vault.
In New Vegas, by the time you get to it, it's been taken over by this group of people called the Powder Gangers. It's just taken over by these.
Oh, that was the Powder Gangers place. I forgot about that.
Yeah, that was one of their places where they had set up.
And you could actually get a red jumpsuit there, couldn't you?
I believe you can get the red jumpsuit there. Yeah, there might even be a blue one. I don't actually remember, like the proper blue one. So Vault 21, which is also in New Vegas. Because it's the best game, so they put a lot of vaults in that one. A social experiment. Now this is straight up in Las Vegas, Nevada. That's where the vault is. It was a social experiment to study the effects of excessive gambling, where all disputes were to be resolved through games of chance. And yeah, it later became a hotel in New Vegas run by Mr. House, who's an important power player in that game. Yeah, you get the picture right there of the casino, but yeah. So I guess kind of a successful vault. Wasn't a control group, but it didn't go super wrong.
Only the people obsessed with gambling survived.
They're okay apparently. I mean, they're still there.
Funny how the gambling vault is the one that's actually okay.
Well, in all fairness, like they say it was to experiment with excessive gambling, but the way they describe it as like all disputes organized through games of chance kind of makes it feel like it was probably a pretty peaceful place where you just resolved everything through these little games and stuff like that.
You get an argument, you got to fight about it. You're just like, all right, let's roll some dice, baby.
Yeah, you just play Warhammer.
This is the Yu-Gi-Oh vault.
Yeah, basically, it's the Yu-Gi-Oh vault.
It's time to dude.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh
Yu-Gi-Oh!
man, you guys got through your blue eyes.
they had it ready.
It's the Yu-Gi-Oh! Vault, the Magic the Gathering Vault, the Warhammer Vault. This is the one right here.
Yeah, and there's probably escalating levels of complaints. Like, if it's a minor dispute, then you play like a game of Kill Team, and then it bumps up to a Combat Patrol, and then it gets to a full 2,000-point game.
If it's real bad, your guys are playing Apocalypse across the entire vault with
10,000 points. Both sides.
Titans.
Eventually, you just end up playing like
In the entire room dedicated to this game, everyone just shows up to watch.
Well, yeah, it would be like it'd be kind of like watching court TV, but instead of a courtroom, it's just a game room, right? Toasty, I'm gonna need you to pull up a picture. I'm gonna be right back. I'm just gonna hit the bathroom real quick. This is a great one. This is a great vault. Look up Vault 22. See if you can get a couple pictures of the creatures from Vault 22.
Oh, that's the plant one.
Yeah, it's the plant one. All right, I'll be right back.
Good. I did not like hearing the level of excitement in his voice.
This is one of the last things I did on New Vegas.
Oh my! Looked like I just walked into Poison Ivy's funhouse.
I mean, kinda. There's more than that. I'll pop up another one. So yeah, that's the outside of the vault. You walk up and you're like, oh yeah, this is crazy. And look at all this lush vegetation, in a post-apocalyptic Nevada. They were doing something right. Bad. Yeah. And then you go in and all of a sudden you hear like all these weird sounds. And then you go in there. Oop. Got giant plant life trying to kill you. It's its own whole vibe. I can't remember what I even had to do in there. I was finding stuff for somebody. Remember that much.
Vault 22 is a whole vibe. It's a whole movement.
It is.
It's
movement. A lifestyle.
Well, I mean, it looks like they took Australia, put it in a vault, and then set it in Nevada.
It's even worse.
There's no living, animals that'll kill you.
Well, there's the people.
There's the fauna and the flora.
So the thing is that vault basically created Australian plants. They didn't just find them; they created them. You see, because the point of that vault was to study and hopefully create genetically modified crops and flora that would be able to flourish even in a nuclear wasteland. Right?
Here's a good summary of it.
Oh, I thought you were going to post like in the stay off the plants. Yeah, basically. And it's crazy, right? Because you just show up here, you're in the middle of the Nevada desert, and you just see like this lush green valley. You're like, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah, you look at it and you're like, man, these guys were doing something right. Like that.
Yeah, you end up getting sent there as a quest by some guy who sent one of his assistants to go look at it, to research whatever. That's not really important. You're supposed to go after a guy who went in and never came back, and you start to understand why he never came back. They created like what would you call it? It's kind of like a fungal infection sort of thing. And the actual fungus was designed for pest control on the plants, not to actually do anything to people. The problem is that the fungal spores would start to infect people and just living creatures in general, and they colonize the host body. And then the host eventually dies because their bodily functions stop working, and the colony continues to expand through the body. So eventually the host's entire motor control is fully controlled by the fungal colony. If you can imagine it kind of like the worms from Futurama, but they're like a spore instead.
I was going to say this sounds like a call forward to The Last of Us.
Sort of, yeah. That's a better way to put it. It's kind of like that. And as soon as they get control and they like take over the host body, they start to spray new spores everywhere to infect other things. Yeah, that's really all there really needs to be said about it. Get a nice close up of the spore carrier if you can, Toasty, like one of the people.
Oh, yeah.
One of the most terrifying enemies in this entire game, because you just kind of walk around, and in the corner of the hallways, you just get like this little mound of dirt and grass with some plants and leaves sticking out of it. And if you pay attention closely, you'll see that there's like what appears to be a man in a green morph suit crouching inside it, not doing anything, and you can't target him in VATS. You have to like shoot him directly manually or get close, and then he wakes up and they start doing crazy damage on you with their swings.
Which is super annoying for somebody like me who just
annoying.
taps bats the entire time they're walking through scary areas.
It's not fun. There's good reason why you don't encounter it early in the game. You have to get a couple places first. We'll skip over Vault 29. It's a social experiment. It's only mentioned in Fallout 76. It's said to be full of rich, obnoxious teenagers. That's all that's said about it.
Ugh.
Not great. Not great time. Not a great time. Vault 31, a lot of people, and Vaults 31, 32, and 33 are the sort of connected ones from the TV show. There's, as a matter of fact, Toasty, if you want to talk about some of that, if you think it's relevant, you can talk about what its actual purposes were, those three connected ones.
Just like how this is episode 33.
It's almost like Ray and I planned this.
There was some kind of plan involved. Believe it or not, I had a lot of time to prepare for this episode, and this is still how it's turned out.
Hey,
a lot better than any episode. A lot better than any episode I've ever led, my friend. So,
don't say that. Don't say that. Yeah, like I only watched like half of the show. There's probably a bunch of extra spoilers about those vaults that I don't know about. If you think they're kind of relevant or interesting, Toasty, feel free to take over for those three.
Man, all I remember from those is it was a way of, keeping interbreeding out of the system, and it was like, to strengthen relations, my daughter will marry somebody from 33 or whatever. And then it turned out that the original people that the main characters from were all like from the vault, and some were mutated. And then the other vault got killed and taken over by raiders, really. And then they ended up kind of going ham on
quote unquote raiders, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if I distinctly remember like some mention coming up that it technically is a set of social experiment vaults, but not in a malicious way. Like they wanted to see what would happen if like several vaults could rely on each other, not just for genetic diversity, but just in the case of like a crisis in one vault. Because otherwise, if you think about all the other vaults, like 13 we were talking about from Fallout 1, like if your water chip just breaks down unexpectedly, well, you're kind of screwed now. Like you're gonna have to leave the vault.
Well, I think if I remember correctly, I think one of the vaults actually got invaded by people from the outside.
Yeah, and like the first episode, I forget which one it is. It's the main character's vault.
Yeah.
Because one of the other ones got invaded by the raiders first, and then
so they opened up to be like there was supposed to be a marriage or something, and there was supposed to
and it was just a big red wedding-esque betrayal kind of thing going on. We can move on to Vault 34. Just go through that quickly. It's from New Vegas yet again. It's not clear what the intended goal of the social experiment was, but the social experiment was the inhabitants were provided access to an overstocked armory with virtually no security measures, which eventually resulted in the inhabitants manually putting locks on the armory and restricting access to security officers. But there was a schism over these measures that led to a group of them leaving and making a tribe, which you know them in New Vegas as the Boomers. You probably remember those guys.
Oh, yeah, the Boomers.
The Boomers have all this crazy stuff. They have like an actual bomber that they still know how to fly. They have all these crazy artillery guns and.
Did they have the
small
bomber, or
arms.
was that what we pulled out of the lake?
Yeah, they don't have it at the start, but they
Okay.
know where it is, and you can help them recover it, and it helps you later in like the final battle kind of thing. To get there, you basically have to run across an open space, dodging artillery fire that they shoot at you.
Yeah,
because they
they're
shoot
shooting
anybody
at
who
you.
gets close. Yeah, they just like anybody who gets close, they're shooting at you. It says there was a reactor leak in the original vault that led to the death or ghoulification of the original guys. So the boomers were smart to leave, I suppose. Vault 51, we'll go through it quickly. Mentioned in Fallout 76. It's from Appalachia. There was a social experiment in which an AI was tasked with selecting an ideal overseer from the population, which just snowballed into a worse thing because the AI started creating crises to test the abilities of the inhabitants, which ended up becoming lethal. And then there was direct manipulation to encourage the remaining inhabitants to kill one another just to get one ideal overseer who's like the best. Great experiment. Fantastic.
So basically, in this quest to find a perfect leader, no one was good enough.
You kill everybody.
Yeah, I'd say whoever could kill the rest of them was the best of the leaders, right?
Whoever is lucky.
Basically,
and strong
Angron
enough.
was the leader.
Yeah, basically. Something like that. There's Vault 63, also from 76. Apparently it was unfinished, so everybody just turned into ghouls. So kind of like Necropolis, but it wasn't intentional, I guess.
I think they're all feral, too. I don't think anybody turned into a good one.
Yeah, no, they're probably all like glowing ones and stuff like that. Glowing ones are a very specific kind of feral ghoul. They literally glow and they can explode. They make like nuclear explosions.
They radiate radiation.
Oh, big time. Big time. Even before they explode.
Yeah, as I say, even if you get close to them to do melee. Yeah.
Yeah. There's Vault 75, which Toasty might be familiar with from Fallout 4, which was a social and medical experiment. They basically ran a eugenics program so they could breed perfect soldiers, which worked really well because the test subjects eventually just revolted against the researchers. Great thinking right there. Great thinking. Vault 76 from Fallout 76. Control Vault. Not a whole lot to talk about there. The inhabitants.
Yeah, it's just where the player character starts.
Yeah, it's just like a normal vault, and things were okay. Things were cool, I guess. Vault 77, kind of a funny one. Not known where it is, but it's from Fallout 3. It was a social experiment in which a single man was locked in a vault with only puppets to keep him company.
I know this one.
Yeah.
Is it the whole thing where he lost his mind?
He lost his mind because all he had was puppets, and he, I guess, left at some point because he's mentioned he's a superstitious figure of great fear by a slaver group that lives in a place called Paradise Falls. They have created like a boogeyman based on this guy who went nuts because he had a vault that was just him and a bunch of puppets. Vault 79, which is in West Virginia from Fallout 76. It was a Secret Service facility. They were just going to house all the U.S. gold reserves there. There was a reactor leak, blah, blah, blah. Everybody gets killed or turned to ghouls. Probably part of some quest in Fallout 76, but nobody knows that.
That's the usual thing for 76.
Yeah.
It's like...
And nobody knows it because nobody played 76 for more than 5 minutes. So
I played it for 33.
Okay, fair enough. How much of that was you re-downloading the patch so it would actually run? How much of that time was you re-downloading the patch?
Very little because my stuff does it all while I'm not around.
Oh, that's cool. That's handy.
Shots fired.
That's handy. You could make a whole episode.
I will say, okay,
if
you just go look at every Fallout game. There's bugs. That is just a fact of Bethesda.
That's true. Most of the bugs do not make the game unplayable on day one, though.
And debatable. Starfield was a thing.
That's but that's Starfield. I'm not talking about Starfield.
We're talking about Bethesda right now.
We're talking about Fallout. Okay?
I'm going all over. Okay.
Talking about Fallout. Okay?
But
okay.
As with ESO, it has become a more playable, more fun game.
I'm sure.
But the people who played it originally and stuck with it are far superior to the rest of us.
I'm just going to say that you could make a whole episode just about the problems that happened within like the first couple months of that game existing.
Oh, yeah.
It was a disaster, an unprecedented disaster of a video game release. And I knew it was going to be like that. As soon as they mentioned it was going to be an online Fallout game, I was like, this is going to be a disaster.
Yeah, as soon as you make any MMORPG.
It's a big risk. Anyway, on to Vault 81, which is also from Fallout 4. So it was in Boston. It was a research facility for scientists trying to come up with a universal disease cure. And they tried to develop that by doing all these crazy experiments on unwitting civilians. So kind of like a big Tuskegee experiment kind of vault.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Not a good one.
Not a good one. Vault 87 from Fallout 3. So it's in Virginia. It was a research facility where they were studying the effects of something called the forced evolutionary virus. There is a ton of
FNV, baby.
Yeah, there's a ton of history to that we don't need to go into. Suffice it to say, yeah, it's a whole episode just going into the forced evolutionary virus. The important thing to remember.
Give you a little.
Yeah, go for it, Toasty. Give the summary.
No, I'm not giving you a summary. I'm just gonna give you a little sneak peek.
Picture here. Sure. Yeah, get the picture of the goop. Yeah, it turns people into super mutants. If you're lucky, you survive and become a super mutant.
So this was basically we're gonna make Space Marines. And it did not become Space Marines. It became basically orcs.
Yeah. Imagine if, like, instead of the Emperor coming up with this crazy set of serums to make someone into a super soldier, it was like Magnus trying to do it from a half-written recipe in an old book. Like, it was...
Fabius Bile was the one doing the experiments.
Yeah, it was some rough stuff. So that vault was literally just them... exposing civilians to the forced evolutionary virus. And so they all became super mutants and they took control of the vault and started spreading outward. Super mutants are a common enemy in most of these games.
And it seems like they've gotten worse throughout the games because New Vegas, we had a whole town of them that were friendly.
Well, most of the crazy ones, the super crazy ones that like can't be reasoned with, are from like Massachusetts, Virginia, a lot of that kind of stuff. The ones that are in California are a little more mixed. Like the ones from Fallout 1 and 2 and New Vegas.
Yeah, because you had towns in 1 and 2 that were just super mutants too, didn't you? Or at least like
well,
they dealt with people.
Yeah, like in Fallout 1, I wouldn't say in like a town, quote unquote, but in Fallout 1, the main antagonist turns out to be this guy called the Master, who is like a crazy... He fell into a vat of the forced evolutionary virus, but he also fell in with like a couple other people, and he's kind of this weird amalgamation of people attached to a computer. It's very creepy. Show them a picture of that, because he's a real creepy looking dude. And when he talks, different words from the sentences will come out in the different voices, and some of them are shouting and some of them are whispering. It's an eldritch nightmare. There he is, the Master.
He's just a friendly little guy.
So he leads like a religion that he created called Unity, and his idea is he's like, everybody has to be super mutants, because then we'll be immune to radiation, and we're the next step of human evolution, and we're going to make all this cool stuff. Really dumb plan, but tragic. He did all kinds of horrible things to try to make that plan come true. You stop him in the first game. There's a number of ways of doing that. You can just kill him. The coldest one and the easiest one, because it means you don't have to fight him, is if you do enough research about super mutants in that game from certain areas, and you have high enough speech, and you navigate the conversation properly, you can point out to him that super mutants are sterile. So if everybody becomes a super mutant, the human race is finished. There's no reproduction anymore. And he like collapses under the weight of all the horrible things he did for
The
his dream.
realization.
Yeah, and like now understanding of what he's done and how every horrible thing he did was completely pointless, and he made it worse. So he like sets the base to self-destruct or whatever and tells you to get out. I think is, in my opinion, the canon way to finish one. It makes the best ending, honestly. So in Fallout 1, there are places where you run into super mutants, and they aren't always necessarily hostile, and most of them do communicate to some degree. And in 2, there is a whole town of them that's just for them as well. It really is only in like Massachusetts and Virginia, so like Fallout 3 and 4, and like some of the later ones that usually don't take place in California. Those ones are
get like
those ones are crazier. And stuff.
There's a explanation for it in man, I want to say the YouTuber is Camelworks that went into it, and he explains why, like, you know, the east to the west super mutants are different than what they, you know, their counterparts.
Different strain of the virus, maybe.
It might be. I can't remember. It's been years.
It becomes clear in Fallout 2 and in New Vegas that one particular reason why the California super mutants are specifically so communicative and not necessarily hostile does have to do with the fact that, like ghouls, super mutants are like functionally immortal. They can get really old. A lot of the ones you run into in games that take place in California were part of the Master's army and remembered that time. And some of them still have a very optimistic attitude towards the world and are not just crazy berserkers. Fallout Vault 88 from one of the DLCs for Fallout 4 is just a testing facility for productivity boosting equipment, yada yada yada. Not important, probably sucks. Vault 92 from Fallout 3 was a medical experiment where they just constantly played white noise to drive everybody crazy. And everybody eventually went insane, and everybody killed each other. So when you get to Vault 92 in Fallout 3, it's basically just full of creatures like bloat flies and mirelurks. I don't know if you want to...
Does it? It has the noise playing in the background, doesn't it?
Yes, it's constant white noise. It's still playing when you get there.
I thought so. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is a mirelurk. They're giant crab people.
Yeah, they're kind of cool, actually. I kind of like mirelurks.
Everything is crab.
There's crab people.
Like, they look like they'd be bros. They look like they'd be fun dudes to be friends with.
If they weren't such dickheads.
If they weren't crabs trying to kill you, yeah.
And then you got the mirelurk. What's the other one?
The meat. They're very meaty.
Yeah, you get some mirelurk meat. There's one that looks like the freaking creature from the Black Lagoon.
That's true. There's a lot of eldritch creatures in Fallout 3, come to think of it.
In all the Fallouts, there's...
Yeah, but 3 has like a disturbing amount of some of them.
76 went all into cryptids.
Did it really? Okay.
Yeah, you got Mothman, you got... oh, crap, what's that?
That's in 76?
In 76, Mothman is like a main antagonist / helper type person. It's really weird. Mothman's a weird freaking character.
I would have figured it was 4. Isn't Mothman like a Massachusetts cryptid?
No, Mothman, he was West Virginia. That's Point Pleasant, where the bridge fell between West Virginia and Ohio.
What cryptid am I thinking of?
You're probably thinking of the Jersey Devil, maybe?
Probably. Let me look that up.
I'm going to pull up a list of the cryptids from Fallout 76 because I can't remember the names.
Yes, I was thinking of the Jersey Devil.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so let me ask this. Other than the really crappy, like, launch day reception, like, what's the main complaint with Fallout 76? Because I do not hear many good things about it, if at all.
Well, I would say probably just that it's an MMO probably put a lot of people off.
Yeah, because I mean,
that's the reason I didn't play it at all, because I had a feeling it wasn't going to be all that great.
Everybody coming from a Fallout background, it's just like Soulsborne. If all of a sudden Soulsborne was like, "Hey, we're gonna come out with this MMORPG," like 95% of the work would be like, "No."
Well, it's funny actually, because there was a multiplayer attempt at Fallout before, like in the early 2000s, but it was in the design of like the first two games. It had that Diablo thing going on, which is probably why they decided to try it, and it was just shit. So a lot of people probably didn't want to give online Fallout another chance.
Which I mean, 76 is one of those things like Rust, where like if you can play with your friends and you can do stuff, it's super cool. Like I've built bases and stuff on there. I like going around and fighting all the crazy things. Like, so real quick cryptids list just to give you if you're a cryptids fan like I am.
I'm gonna refill my water while you do that.
Fallout 76 has the Mothman. It has the Wendigo. It has the Grafton Monster, which is, I'm pretty sure, was found in the West Virginia area. Sheep Squatch. Sasquatch that looks like a goat, basically. Snallygaster, which I'm pretty sure Flub is a big fan of. So
I've heard of the Snallygaster.
The Beast of Beckley, which I can't recall anything of, but I'd have to look into. And then the Flatwoods Monster, which is known as like, that was the one that everybody described as like two bicycle reflectors with its eyes, kind of like the Mothman. So those are just a quick little overview of them. And I mean, as they do with Fallout games, the Wendigo has like glowing Wendigos and albino Wendigos, and the Mothman I think only has the Mothman.
They've just like got tired of creating their own mutated creatures. Like, you know what, let's just put a bunch of cryptids in there.
So it was a cool way to kind of like pay tribute to stuff like that, just like they do with Lovecraft.
I mean, it adds to the region. If there was going to be a game that was going to have cryptids, it makes perfect sense.
Oh yeah, that in Ohio like are like the giant regions of like, there's 32 different myths in this one city. What the fuck's going on?
I feel like if they took a lot of stuff that's in 76 and it was made like a regular game, like a single player game, I don't think anybody would have any issues with it.
Not at all. No, yeah.
I think it would be like a perfectly standard Fallout release that people would just enjoy for what it is.
100% correct.
And it would still have, bugs of its own.
Yeah.
I'm going to skip ahead a fair bit more here because there's a lot of ones from 4 and 76 that just don't have a lot going on. We're going to get to 101, the vault from Fallout 3 that you started, which was a social experiment of its own. It was an experiment in which the Overseer is granted unlimited authority, and the vault is intended to remain closed essentially forever. It has no open date. The Overseer who runs it when you start that game, though, just completely threw that plan out the window because he started sending people out of the vault, like scouting parties all the time just for random stuff, and eventually recruited a doctor who turns out to be your father in that game. That's a whole other plot thing going on. The vault descends into civil war after your father, and then you leave the vault at the beginning of that game. Vault 106, which is also from Fallout 3, was a medical experiment that I guess would be best described as an MK Ultra simulator, I guess. Because they just released psychoactive drugs into the air through the filtration systems. They just like dosed everybody on LSD. And the population erupted in violence. And it's not really known what happened to all of them. Maybe some of them left. Maybe they're all dead in there. The drugs are still in the air supply 200 years later when you enter the vault in Fallout 3. And it's very spooky. Like, you start getting all these crazy hallucinations when you're going through the vault. It's a real trip for sure.
Well, there's a few of those in Fallout.
Yeah. It catches you off guard. I remember that vault being
It's one of the ones that I don't know. It doesn't tie into the Dunwich, does it?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't think so.
I'll say because Dunwich does the same thing where like I think 106 was the hallucinogens, and then Dunwich stuff is all like spirits and ghosts and stuff, and yeah, which Dunwich is from Lovecraft.
Yeah. Sorry, I thought you were referring to the specific story, the Dunwich horror, which is different.
Yes.
That one's not about spirits. That one's just about a beast. But there's a lot of stuff that happens in that area in other Lovecraft stories.
I'd say when you're going through the Dunwich horrors, you're going through the Dunwich. Is that the Dunwich Hotel in 3?
Probably. Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, you're going through it, and like a little spirit girl will pop up or whatever.
You're getting the spirit stuff. Yeah. It's just I got confused. That's a different Lovecraft story. I thought you were talking about the one specifically just called the Dunwich Horror, which is about a beast.
Okay.
But yeah, no, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stories he wrote that do occur in that area, though. Vault 108 is another favorite. Kind of tragic, also just deeply hilarious. Because the social experiment originally was to study the effects of leadership conflicts. Management positions were to be filled by a terminally ill overseer. The power systems were designed to fail after 20 years. There was no entertainment, and the armory had triple the standard ordnance. But what ended up happening is that vault also had a cloning device, and there was a single inhabitant named Gary who was cloned repeatedly, and they turned violent and overran the vault and killed all the other people. Now, when you go into that vault, there's just a bunch of the same guy, and the only thing that he knows how to say is Gary, and he screams it at you. Yeah, he does the Pokemon thing. And so you'll be surrounded by like 7 identical dudes trying to punch you wearing the vault suit. And one of them is yelling Gary. The other one is saying it in a questioning manner. There's another one who's just simply stating it. And it just kind of overloads you with all these different people that are the same person saying Gary. It's a trip.
It's like a vault of Hodors. Hodor.
Yes.
Hodor.
Yeah. That's exactly what it is. If Hodor was also like super crazy and violent and wanted to kill you.
He is.
No, but like just killing everybody on sight.
How dare you insult Hodor like that?
Honored be his name.
There's Vault 111, which is the one from 4. It was a big experiment to see what the long-term effects would be of putting people in cryogenic stasis. It was an unwitting group of subjects. They just kind of put people in cryo freeze. And there was a power failure that I think killed everybody except for like the main character or whatever. Vault 112, which is from Fallout 3, which is another interesting one that you can go to because when you get into it, it's like a virtual reality simulator.
Oh yeah, that one.
And you're just in like this idyllic looking 1950s-esque town. I don't know if there's pictures of it.
You went to town?
It's what is it? Just look up Vault 112 virtual reality or something. Just Vault 112. It's got to be there somewhere. It's like a black and white. It looks like an old episode of like Leave It to Beaver in black and white.
There we go.
And there's like an evil little girl in there that's causing problems and stuff. You end up figuring out that it was a social experiment in which the inhabitants are all in virtual reality and it's controlled by the overseer. Yeah, there you go. That's a good picture of it. And the overseer is actually the guy who's playing the psychotic little girl. Because he's just a sadist and he wanted to screw around with these people and he tortured them for like centuries in this never-ending virtual reality thing.
That bastard.
Yeah, it was not great. And then there's Vault 114 from Fallout 4, which was a social experiment in which wealthy inhabitants would be stripped of their luxury and forced to live in cramped squalor under an incompetent overseer.
I think that one's one of my favorite ones. That one I know about.
You know, it would be, except the vault was never completed, possibly due to fraud and or embezzlement. So it never actually happened. It's just a half-constructed vault, unfortunately.
I think that would be a lot of people's favorite vault.
A lot of people would like that one for sure. And then
as with
there's
most things Bethesda related, there's a mod that completes it for you.
oh, for sure. I'm sure there's a vault. There's like a mod for most of these ones that aren't like finished. And Vault 118, which is the last one on the canon list, which is also from one of the DLCs in Fallout 4, was a social experiment in which 10 wealthy residents would live in luxury, while 300 impoverished residents lived in squalor. And the wealthy residents had total authority. This one also wasn't finished, also due to embezzlement of construction funds. Yeah, that's a whole other thing. Okay, so let me just real quick pop down to some of the semi-canon or non-canon ones. There's a bunch of ones that were just like demonstration vaults that weren't never meant to be used and weren't. So we'll get into some of the supplementary ones. These ones we'll go through real quick. These are from a document called the Fallout Bible. They might have made an interactive game out of it. It doesn't really matter. It was written by one of the OG guys who made the original games. He said it's not canon. It's just like an experiment in world building. But because he's like one of the OGs, I think we can kind of just appreciate it.
It's like that thing with Elder Scrolls. Like if Michael Kirkpatrick wrote it,
yeah,
we're gonna believe it.
Yeah, like I had said beforehand in the group chats, like if George R. R. Martin wrote a book with all these crazy side stories in Westeros, but then said they're not canon, I don't think anybody's going to care. It's basically canon.
As far as we're concerned.
Yeah. So Vault 27 was deliberately overcrowded. It was 2,000 people assigned to enter, and the vault was only designed for half of that. Vault 36, in which the food machines were designed to produce only a thin, watery gruel. Vault 42, I guess, is where the Night Lords were supposed to go because there's no light bulbs of more than 40 watts allowed.
Oh no! Oh no!
It hurt my eyes.
Yeah, you know. Vault 43, which I wish there was more about. A social experiment in which 20 men and 10 women would be forced to live with a live panther. Don't know what the point of that experiment was.
What?
It's one of those things like adapt and overcome. Can you kill it or can you survive alongside of it?
It's just, yeah. Vault 53, most of the equipment was designed to break down every few months. While very much repairable, the breakdowns were intended to stress the inhabitants unduly. Vault 55, where no entertainment tapes were provided, so no movies or shows or books or anything like that. Vault 56, on the other hand, the only entertainment tapes provided were the works of a particularly untalented comedian. I'm going to skip 68 and 69, and Ray's going to say a little thing about that after, because he remembers that non-canon short story better than I do about one of them. Vault 70 was a social experiment in which the jumpsuit extruders would fail after basically the jumpsuits would break after 6 months so that everybody would be basically nude. Not sure what the point of that was. Doesn't really matter.
The designer of that vault was
very horny, apparently.
And yeah, then there's 77 mentioned again, which was the one where the guy just was alone with a crate of puppets. That's just about that for the semi or non-canon ones. There's a bunch of others that were cut from various games for whatever reason we don't have to get into. So let me just say one of the vaults here before Ray takes over for the other one. So Vault 68, there are 1,000 people in it, and only one of them is a woman. The rest of them are men.
Oh no.
Then there's
3 months.
then there's Vault 69, which is the opposite, where there's one man and 999 women. Now there was a short story or a Reddit post or something that somebody wrote about how horrible that one might be, and Ray remembers it a little better than me. So Ray, go ahead.
Okay, so from how the short story went, I believe there was actually a degree of canonicity to it, or like there was debate about whether or not it was canon because of like how the short story happened. Regardless, the idea
the short story is like completely a fan thing, but I think it makes sense.
Yeah, like I think it's one of the things where it's like it's a fan made thing, but people kind of all like acknowledge that that would probably be the most likely thing that would happen given Voltec's whole situation that they have going on.
And given how
Regardless,
Fallout in general is, the worst thing usually does happen, right?
Yeah.
So this was a fan fiction that was just written so well it could pass as something that was canon.
I consider it canon.
Yeah. It probably would have been canon if they had ever explored that vault for whatever reason.
Yeah. But basically, yeah, it was every vault meant to have 1,000 people, from what I understand. And this one had 999 women and one man. How the short story went was that the man, alongside his wife and child, were permitted in. So outside of his wife and his daughter, there was 997 other women. Now, the short story goes on to say that over the first couple of weeks, everything was fine. You know, they lived all whatever. He was made the overseer because, like, whatever, make him the overseer. He's the only guy, whatever.
He was like a good engineer or something.
I don't know. I don't fully remember that. I know he was made the overseer for some he became the overseer. And what happened was over time, like tensions started to grow among the women, and he was always on by all the women, but whatever. He was loyal to his wife. He had a kid. Eventually, however, those women got angry, and following a violent uprising, they actually broke into his room, into like the overseer's room, and proceeded to kill his wife and daughter. At which point, the attackers attacked him in probably the one of the worst ways possible. At which point they would then refurbished the overseer's room to go from like an office to a prison cell. And the short story goes on to say that the only human interaction he has from that point on is him being given food and a single person coming in to meet him every single day. And he says that for the first couple months he hated it, he despised it, he tried to like resist or whatever. But then he started to get complacent. He started to actually like it, and then he just got numb to it. And he said that over year, and he writes in this journal for years, and he says the weirdest thing is that he never seems to see people. He never seems to hear about boys being born, because again, he's having unprotected sex with all these women, but they're never hearing anything about pregnancies where boys are being born, or at the very least, no one ever mentions boys being born. They do ever mention girls being born a lot. And over years and years of him basically becoming numb to this horrible situation, women of every age start visiting him, from like the oldest women of like over 60 years to children. And he says that, like, given how long he's been in here, none of those children would be his, but he fears that one day they will be. And that's where the short story ends.
Uncomfortable to think about, to say the least.
I mean, this is like a Craster situation from Game of Thrones. If anybody knows about that, that's all I'm going to say.
And somehow even darker, because it's Craster, but he's there against his will. Yeah. It's even worse.
You're gonna have to kill me before you put me in a situation like that.
Well, not only that, it's not only is it a crass situation, but worse, it's against his will. It's a crass situation where he is literally a prisoner who's basically in solitary confinement, with his only interaction being assaulted. Right? Like that's his own, like it isn't just like, oh, I'm Craster, I have all these women, like, yeah, whatever, it's against my will. No, it is he is in solitary confinement, and only once a day is he visited by someone he doesn't even get to have a connection with. Like, he doesn't know these people. He meets them once they're gone. That's gonna fuck anyone up mentally.
For thought.
Absolutely.
Food for thought. That just about covers it as far as vaults and the horrific things that occur within them.
I mean, and you contracted out this group to build this vault here under the tavern?
Yeah, I wouldn't worry so much about it. We're probably
contract
not
him.
one
He
of
started it.
we're
He's
probably
the
not
original.
one of the experimental groups. We're probably a control group. I wouldn't worry too much about it.
I
There's
would
2
certainly
dwarves, an
hope
elf,
so.
and a demon in here.
I mean, hey, if I was so involved and it was going to be a horrible experiment, would they have put me in here and put me at risk? Come on, they wouldn't do that to me.
I mean, that sounds like a Skaven thing to do, so I hope
They
you didn't
wouldn't do
hire
that.
any Skaven.
Oh god, what if it's all a
No, but
Skaven idea?
I'm pretty sure Exo already knows how to get in here. He keeps showing up.
Damn rats.
Oh, man.
Events.
Are there any Fallout related questions anybody would like to get out of the way?
I don't
Stuck
think
in
I
a vault.
have.
What vault do you pick?
Had to be in a vault?
Yeah.
Um,
Now I should preface this is under the specific condition that you know that, like, basically this vault's gonna work. All right, you know for at the very least that this vault is going to work. So, like, there's no unexpected, like, like, outside of what's supposed to happen, there's no unexpected situations.
I don't know which of the control ones I would want to live in.
No, not a control one.
But just one where I know what the problem, because the non-control ones all have some kind of issue.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's what I mean.
You
Like,
mean
outside
you
of
mean
the
the intended
predetermined,
problem, right?
yeah.
You know what? All things considered, actually, regardless of the conditions of the question, I think my answer is always going to have to be Vault 34, the one that the boomers came from, because no matter what happens, I have access to a bunch of weapons and I can make a decision. I can do something here.
I mean, that vault sounds like a
Doomsday Prepper's like wet dream.
Oh, big time. Big time.
So I
Well,
might have to agree. I
sort
might
of.
have to agree with that one.
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe.
it's not exactly a doomsday prepper because the only thing is the weapons. They don't have like all the extra food.
Yeah,
They just have
the
a bunch of
food.
weapons. But
That's all
weapons
you
are
need. With
a
the extra
possibility.
weapons, you can get food.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if it's a situation in which everybody can access the weapons, like I have some kind of chance here, even if it's just to leave. Like some of the people did leave. Like there's something I can do there. If I just like leave with a plasma rifle and some ammo and stuff like that, like I don't care. I'm fine. I'll find food outside. I'll kill some things. Doesn't matter.
All right. And what if
And
we
get
turn this
something.
question on the hosts?
Yeah. And also Toasty, you're gonna get a turn.
I already got mine. I already know mine.
Hard mode. Nobody can pick the boomer one.
Nobody can pick the boomer one. No one can pick the good one. Okay. For me, I think I would honestly pick the cryogenic one because assuming the power doesn't go out, like if I know for a fact, hey, the power won't go out. Okay, well, I'm picking that one because from what we've seen in Fallout 4, you just wake up and you're fucking fine, right? Like you're a little dizzy, but then like within 5 seconds you're killing fucking rad roaches. So I mean, plus I would like survive. I'd be like, I'd be 200 years in the future.
Jump ahead quite a bit.
Hmm.
Actually, that might actually make you more crazy, honestly, to just jump 200 years in the future, because you know
Well,
what
it
the
wouldn't
world
just
is
be
like.
me, right? Because like if you have like if you have the boomers with you, whatever, you have that you aren't alone. Then I have at the very least the idea that at least like 10, 20 other people are going to be with me.
Well, here's actually kind of an interesting idea with that, because I don't think it's particularly it's necessarily laid out so specifically in Fallout 4, but there isn't really a guarantee that you were going to be allowed to live after a certain time. because the experiment was to see long-term effects. So you'll survive a bit after you wake up because they need to know some stuff. But who's to say they're not just going to kill you after that or use you for some other experiment?
I think that was the
Vault
issue. Fallout 4 was the fact that they were taking the people to make them into other stuff.
Revealed later? Okay.
You gotta play Fallout 4?
I played. No, I haven't played any of it, but I've seen a fair bit of like the first half of it.
Wait, of which one? Which one have you seen the first half of?
Fallout 4.
Oh. All right. So who's next? What other vaults would you guys want to go in?
Gerald.
G-Man, what's the pick here?
Um,
I'll give you a minute to think about that because I said hard mode, no boomer vault. I'm gonna pick another one. Just so
okay,
that
so no boomer vault, and which one did Ray say he would do?
the freezing one.
The freeze. Okay, so not that one.
But does that answer change based on the fact that Toasty has revealed that there were other plans for you afterwards? You weren't just gonna go about your life?
I'm just gonna answer based off the fact I don't know what Toasty's gonna pick, and we'll just go from there. I'd probably go with. It's like trying to choose between a top socket or a bottom socket.
So hang on a sec. While you're thinking about that, I totally forgot. When I was skipping through some of the ones from Fallout 4, I totally skipped one I did want to talk about, which is 95, which it was a social and medical experiment in which it was comprised entirely of addicts who were given experimental treatments to rehabilitate them and encourage them to remain clean. And after a certain period of time, they were informed that there's a secret stash of drugs in the vault.
Oh no!
Yeah. I skipped over that one by mistake.
Oh yeah, we got you guys off the Psycho
Relapse.
and
That's the
Mentats.
relapse vault.
The
Oh,
relapse.
there's this room.
Yeah, that one's brutal, man. That one's brutal.
Well, honestly, that one I like. That one I like from an experimental perspective because it's like, can these people overcome addiction?
Okay, we're learning things about Ray as we go along here.
Well, no, I'm just okay. I
The
literally
Ray Lord
defended
people.
Halsey. Okay.
Oh.
Oh man.
So, does Gerald know what he wants?
I don't know what I want, but Man, this is a tough one.
The gambling one is not bad.
honestly, I think I'll just do the gambling one. Like
that's not a bad one.
If any
can I
kind
do the
of
gambling one so I can play Yu-Gi-Oh?
Yeah. The gambling one's honestly a pretty good one. Yeah, all things considered.
Yeah, I think I'm going to do the gambling ones. Like if my way of settling an argument is just like playing Warhammer or craps or blackjack, you know what? I'm okay with that.
Yeah, for sure. It's a good pick. It's good. Are you telling me you don't want to be in the one where there's only one guy or one girl? You wouldn't want to go.
I've made this point multiple times before. I am a one lover type of person.
That's
absolutely not.
It would be a disaster.
But you think about it and you're like, multiple women? Oh yeah, but then you think about it and you're like,
multiple women.
Oh no.
Yeah, that's.
It just goes both ways. To be fair, like.
No, for sure. Yeah. Like all things considered, even having heard the story that Ray had gone through there, even knowing how bad that could possibly be, I would still rather be the one guy than be the one woman.
Oh God, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a pretty easy choice for me to make. I would definitely rather be the man as opposed to the woman there.
Mm-hmm.
But like, my wife has made the joke, "Oh, what, you don't want another wife?" And I'm like, no, dealing with one of you guys is enough.
Yeah.
The problem with the one the one man vault is genetically you are gonna have to have some inbreeding done at some point. Whereas
Yeah,
like
eventually.
the one woman vault, as long as like everyone in there has like some decency and like some respect and something, some morals, you can
Nope, at
probably
this point,
rebuild
we're
a
assuming
functional.
Ray would rather be the one woman.
Plot twist.
I'm not. Obviously I'm not a geneticist. I haven't done the big brain work on this, but I think in terms of like genetic diversity, you would probably have a much more successful civilization long term in the one where it was one guy as opposed to the one woman. I think that would probably be better over time, but obviously it still requires everybody to have a system, right? Like it's got to be
Mhm.
the kind of thing where every pairing has to be picked very carefully, and everybody else has to be able to deal with that. Which, like, imagine trying to convince that many people to go along with one plan like this. Big disaster, any which
Mhm.
way.
Well, I think like even like the Matrix had pointed out at one point in time, like in the big reveal, like Zion gets repopulated, it had to be like there always had to be more females than males for the whole genetic diversity to actually work.
Also, if I remember correctly, the movie actually severely understates how many people you would need for that
Oh
to be a
yeah,
viable civilization. Wasn't it something crazy like
it was
10
something. It was
men and
something
30
stupid like
women?
yeah, it was something stupid like 14 men and like 23 women. And like no, you need a lot more than that.
Yeah. I remember looking it up when I started watching the Fallout show, just because that's a big deal with the three main vaults of talking about making their pairings carefully. Let me just relook this up.
While he's looking that up,
I'm looking up
Pretty
the
sure
that
it
all
was
paper.
being said,
500.
you're all
Pretty sure it's 500
cowards.
people. Oh god.
Give me the
I don't know.
FEV.
Why are we cowards? Oh, that's an interesting pick. You can just become a super mutant. That's a
I'm
very
either
corn
dying or
answer.
I'm gonna be a fucking super soldier.
Well, you
How about
could
the rest of
also
you guys?
be. Well, you could go to Necropolis and be a ghoul instead.
No, that's terrible.
I thought about that. I thought about that.
Okay, all right, hold on.
Wait, who said we're a coward?
Me.
You
Toasty
called
did.
us
Who else would
coward
say you're a coward?
because we didn't want to be super mutants.
Hold on. Let me.
Depending on the humans in question and like the general diversity of those humans, it would require anywhere from 500 to 2,000 distinct mating pairs to avoid genetic drift. Like you don't need many people to avoid outright incest within a few generations. The problem is that a few generations down the line is when things start to get a little bit more mixed, and over time there are consequences for the gene pool for that.
Give me power back.
Oh,
It's like that you're to put this in dog terms, it's like, breeding for certain specialties or whatnot, but the problem is certain purebreds have certain predilections for things like hip dysplasia, blah 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 blah. That's the main concern with like genetic drift, like what Astro is talking about.
you just have to look at you have to just look at most uh, powerful dynasties like monarch bloodlines. You just have to look at that because a lot of those bloodlines, if you follow a lot of cases where they started interbreeding at a certain point and they kind of just mixed with cousins and with certain other groups, and there was enough diversity that you didn't have any significant issues. But then a few generations later, once all of the families have started to mix together just a little bit more, you start to notice all these little things becoming more common, and the gene pool just gets progressively worse unless you start adding other people into it.
Yeah, like a famous one was like was it called the Habsburg lip or whatever?
Yeah, let me get the guy's name. Actually, we're gonna show a picture. It's this poor guy. This poor guy. Charles II of Spain. Whoever's got control, please pull up a picture of that.
You say Paul's?
Charles II.
Charles.
Charles II. Maybe the most inbred man in history. Who knows?
Okay, but back to my argument real quick. Super
Yeah,
mutant,
sure.
Ghoul.
Look at that guy. What a dapper outfit he's got going on. Look at this Chad. Look at this animal.
I'm
Look at
doing this.
Brute. That guy
which one of these atrocious pictures do you want? I'm picking.
I'd rather be the Ghoul, man.
You're absurd. Stop it.
Oh man. Dude, there's like a 50-60% chance if you're the super mutant that you already start crazy and you can't talk to people and shit.
I'll take that.
I'd be the Ghoul.
I'm a World Eaters fan.
Yeah, it's a very World Eaters pick for sure. There he is. That handsome devil.
Oh my god.
You guys found the tree.
Dude, hold on, I found another good one.
Oh yeah.
That's Mark Zuckerberg.
Oh boy.
Oh, there's so many.
It's the same. It's people descended from like the same 50 related people. There's a lot of common features. You'll see.
I don't know what this is, but you guys got to see it because I saw it.
Uh-oh.
Oh no.
Are we about to get demonetized? We're about to get demonetized, aren't we?
Oh boy. No. We should be, but no. Oh yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah, poor guy.
He said the thing. He said the thing.
Poor guy.
Okay.
What's Titus Precious?
Boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew. This is a nice fish. We like it raw and wriggly.
I can't.
Okay, do we have any announcements? Do we have any announcements before we finish up this
stop before I keep
episode?
going. I have more pictures.
I would like to announce that the Fallout TV show is not written well, and that's
It's written fine.
Let's
Look, you're gonna get mad because one of the best factions in New Vegas got wiped out.
It's not even that it's a great faction from New Vegas. It's literally one of the most important factions. In New Vegas. In the series.
When else has it popped up?
The first place you go to in the first game is the village that becomes the NCR. You go to Shady Sands, and then in the second one, the NCR already exists, and they're a huge part of that plot. And then in 3, they're not in there because you're in, the DC. And then in New Vegas, the NCR is really important again. Not only is it in the best game, it's in like all of the best games. It's super important to the plot line in general. It's not just the New Vegas.
Okay, but in the end, would you rather them be running around trying to explain to you why this is good, or would you rather them continue the story that they are building now?
I want to see that armor, man. I love that armor.
It's gonna pop up 110% guaranteed. Cool. You're getting that at some point.
If you really wanted to just remove this important faction for no conceivable reason, there are ways you could do that and have it not be as upsetting. Like maybe actually showing it and having it be an important part of an ongoing episode, not flashbacks to something that happened before the show begins. Also, Shady Sands is also a lot bigger than the crater that you see. They made it look like it was a little village, a podunk village.
It was.
It wasn't when it was nuked. It was the capital city of the Republic.
It was small.
Not like that. That would have been fine if they nuked Shady Sands from like the first game, because it was really small in the first game when it was just a little village. What is that? That's
Shady Sands.
No. Even that's bigger than the crater.
Look, in the end, you're nitpicking because you're upset your favorite little guys died in their favorite little area.
Oh, I don't even like the NCR on an ideological level. Whenever I play New
See, the
Vegas,
Legion guy, aren't you?
It's usually yes, man, but Legion is fun too.
See, my whole playthrough is based off of Angron, so I'm doing the Legion.
That makes sense. That's fun. Whenever I play Legion, it's because I'm doing a melee character, so
Exactly.
you get the bumper sword, and then you're good to go.
But in the end,
it doesn't even matter.
They needed to get rid of it because
why?
They're obviously focused on the Brotherhood of Steel.
It's dumb.
And they could write out any one of these factions if they wanted to. If they wanted to, they could have been like, the Brotherhood of Steel got defeated at.
I mean, and that would
New
also
Vegas.
be really stupid. That would also be really stupid if they just
and
wrote
NCR took over all of New Vegas, and that's where we're living now. And then the dad shows up, and he's in power armor, and he gets shot, and he's dead. And then there goes your whole fucking story.
Depending on which ending of New Vegas they take as canon, the Brotherhood of Steel still has a presence in New Vegas.
Well, yeah. So that's basically where we're at now, because I'm
Well,
guaranteeing
no,
Caesar's
that's not
Legions.
where we're at. Well,
Guaranteed.
the place we're at is that the NCR doesn't exist except for
Exactly.
a handful of raiders. But
And
the
I
Brotherhood
guarantee you
of
the
Steel
same
still
thing's going
exists.
on with the Caesar's Legion. I guarantee you there's going to be at least some kind of
They're gonna
mention of
screw it up.
Caesar
They're
Legion
gonna
still
screw
people
up the
come.
Legion so bad.
Well, yeah, they should be, because I mean those were that's the bad guys in the end.
I don't mean that way. I mean I don't think they're going to present the Legion as intriguingly as they are in the game.
No, not at all.
It's not going to be great.
It's a possibility.
I swear, if they just like straight up wipe the Legion as well, like yeah, they got destroyed off screen just like the NCR. We didn't see any. Like
Here's the thing.
It's dumb. Toasty, it's dumb.
No, they destroy the NCR.
It's really dumb.
Okay, you already know there's a handful of other people out there that are part of the NCR.
They're not though. They're basically just raiders that are upset that the NCR doesn't exist. They're not really. See, that's also another thing that could have been done better. Because if they had just made this other force that was like the remnants of the Rangers and some degree of the NCR leadership and stuff like that, and they just made a new faction that was kind of like the NCR but was not quite as powerful but still had some stuff to work with. Like just because Shady Sands get nuked doesn't mean like the Republic shouldn't exist anymore, that there weren't all kinds of people elsewhere. But instead we're just supposed to expect that, oh yeah, one like vault overseer got upset because his wife didn't want to sit in a vault for the rest of her life and she left and whatever. Now we have to nuke this faction out of existence in the plot line. It's dumb. It's bad. There's a lot of great things in the show, but the writing
it's just a matter of thinning the fat, buddy.
It's not fat. It's not
It's
fat.
trimming the fat.
My goodness.
That's not the fat.
All right, hang on.
Ladies, that's enough. That's enough. Ray, do we have another
ladies,
announcement?
you're beautiful.
Wait, no, hold on. Someone get Exo on the line. Bring him in here.
Oh,
my
no,
God.
no.
I'm sure he has
Nope.
opinions.
He does. He has opinions.
I remember that Discord conversation. I'm not recreating that here.
No, we're not going to do that. We're slightly more mature than we were that night.
Okay, so Ray, do we have any announcements before we wrap things up?
At the moment, no, but we have something very close in mind that I'm really excited for. That I want to announce, but let's just finalize that behind the screen first, like between me and you, before we make that announcement, because I am. Well, you're like, I'm excited for it.
Oh, I know you are. I know you are.
So, and don't worry, this one's coming all the way through. We are fucking prepared for this one. This one is not gonna fall through.
Maybe.
What previously fell through?
You don't want to know.
I'm curious now.
Well, I'll tell you know what I'll tell you after. But yeah,
Yeah, send me a DM.
No, we're discussing this in here after the recording's done.
Or that,
I want
yeah.
to know too.
That works too.
Well, I guess if we don't have any other announcements, let me go ahead and thank our patrons. And then, Astra, you have the codes to open up this vault, right? Right.
Oh, the vault?
Yeah.
It's not supposed to open for a good 60 years. Don't worry about that.
Well, okay.
I'll be fine.
Patron time. The Honorable Grail Knight, Sir Flub de Montfort, the Noble Chaos Dwarf Slappy, the Imperial Dwarven Knight, Astronautical, the Trickster Noble of Zinch Warper, the Noble Powerlifter of Nurgle, Big Joe G, the Noble Island Pirate Dwarf, King Admiral, Tier Warlord, Exodite, Replacer, such a lower than the Night, Smoke of the Oven Pipe, Weed, Electric, Priest, Boat, Master, Pound, James, Complaints, Part Man, Part Fish, Fan, Atomic, Bongo, the Barkino, Chicken Farmer, Secret God, Bird, Dead Hammer, Storyteller, Lover, the Farmer's Wife, Man, the Machete, or B&B Host, Fan, Crew Fanboy, Curly, Hunter, Magic Deck Builder, our Bodies, Fanboy, Fisherman, Panmar, Lore Hammer Host, Listener Lore Host, Bill Tarkin, Mark and B Host, Painter of the Knights, the Eternal, follower of Slanesh, Collector of the Dwarves, Erebor, Lorehammer Revivalist, the Enshrouded, he who reads lore, the Canadian Panamanian, aka Trevor Bezak, and Father, Mark from Lorehammer. The Noble Scryer Scave and Exo Flat Claw, the Wizard Noble of Zinch, Magnus the Rad, the Druki Pirate King, Dungledoo Scalecock, not Admiral, he's a Pirate King now, the Noble Priest of Slanesh, Zane Leopard, the Croxagore Knight of Corn, Toasty, and the Errant Plague Knight, De las Rosas. So,
we love all you guys. You guys are amazing. You guys make these episodes happen.
And more every day.
More every day. Mark gets a new title every episode. It's great.
Oh, yeah.
And so, how are we getting out of this vault, Astro? Tell me you have a plan, right?
Well, the plan is for us to not get out, but like I said, Exo seems to get in here a lot, so there might be a way out.
Okay.
No, we have to wait for the rat.
Why do we have to wait for the rat?
Yeah.
Why does this always happen? No.
We can find out how he's getting in. We can close it up, and then we'll be safe from him as well.
You know what? You make a good point. Okay, let's go find that rat.
Yeah, let's find where he's getting in from.